A little girl walks out of the woods covered in mud and blood, steps in front of a column of motorcycles, and whispers 5 words that will unleash a war no one in Blackwater County sees coming. She says, "He said he will come back tonight." The man she's running from is not some drifter. He's a businessman, a pillar of the community. And by morning, the bikers who stopped for her will uncover a trafficking network buried so deep that cops, judges, and neighbors all looked the other way. But tonight, the clock is already ticking, because the man she's running from knows exactly where she is, and he keeps his promises. If this story satisfies even a fraction of the fire it lit in me while writing it, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and stay until the very last word. You won't regret it. The autumn sky over Blackwater County had turned the color of a bruise. Not the kind that fades in a week, the kind that sits deep under the skin, pressing against bone, reminding you with every breath that something inside you broke and never healed right. The clouds stacked low and swollen over the ridge, dragging sheets of cold rain across the industrial flats east of town where nobody lived anymore and nobody wanted to. Old rail yards, collapsed grain silos, miles of cracked asphalt threading through properties the county had forgotten to condemn and the state had forgotten existed. Jace Holloway rode point through the downpour. 43 years old. Road captain of the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club Blackwater chapter. He had a face that looked like it had been built from spare parts. Crooked nose reset twice without anesthesia, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow from a bar fight in Reno he couldn't fully remember, and eyes the color of creek water after a flood. The kind of eyes that had seen things they couldn't unsee and had stopped trying. Behind him, 18 motorcycles carved through the rain in staggered formation, headlights cutting the gray like surgical instruments, the thunder of their engines swallowed by the thunder overhead. Every saddlebag was loaded with toys, stuffed animals sealed in plastic bags, boxed action figures, wrapped dolls with price tags still dangling, because today was the annual charity run. Every year the club collected donations, rode 40 miles to the county children's shelter, and dropped off everything they had. No cameras, no press release, no tax write-off. Just a bunch of men the world had written off doing something the world refused to notice. Grim. Nobody called him Jace anymore except collection agencies and the VA. Shifted his weight and wiped rain from his visor. His right knee ached in the cold. Shrapnel from Helmand Province, 2009. The VA had scheduled him for surgery 3 times and canceled 3 times. The last cancellation came with a form letter that misspelled his name. He'd folded it into a paper airplane, thrown it off the roof of the clubhouse, and watched it nosedive into the parking lot gravel. That was 2 years ago. He still limped when the temperature dropped below 50. The road narrowed where the tree line pressed in from both sides. He saw the shape first. Small. Pale. Standing in the middle of the road like a nail driven into wet concrete. Grim locked his brakes. The rear tires slid 6 inches on the wet asphalt. Behind him, 18 riders reacted in a cascading wave of brake lights and swerving chrome. Engines barked. Someone shouted. A Harley skidded sideways and recovered with a growl that sounded almost human. She was 8 years old, maybe 9. Hard to tell because she was so thin that her collarbone pressed against the skin of her neck like something trying to escape. Mud covered her shoes up past the ankle. Her jacket, too big for her, probably her mother's, hung off one shoulder, and where the sleeve had ridden up, there was blood. Not a lot. Enough. She didn't flinch when the motorcycles surrounded her. Grim killed the engine and swung off the bike. Rain hammered the road. His boots hit the ground and the sound was swallowed by the storm. He crouched in front of her, one knee on the wet asphalt, ignoring the pain that shot up his right leg like a lit fuse. "Hey." His voice came out rough. It always did. Years of cigarettes and screaming over gunfire had sanded it down to something between gravel and a whisper. "You okay?" She stared at him with eyes too old for her face. Brown, steady. The kind of steady that only comes from seeing something no child should see and deciding that crying about it won't change anything. Then she grabbed the front of his leather vest with both hands and pulled herself toward him like she was trying to climb inside his chest. "He said he will come back tonight." 5 words. whispered into the wet leather over his heart. Grim didn't move. Behind him, the other riders had dismounted. He could hear their boots on the road, the click of kickstands, the low murmur of voices asking what the hell was going on. But he didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the girl's face and his hands absolutely still, because he understood something the rest of them hadn't figured out yet. She had chosen him. Out of the storm, out of the woods, out of whatever nightmare she'd been running from, she had stepped into the road and chosen the most dangerous-looking man she could find. And that choice meant something. It meant wherever she came from, the people who were supposed to be safe weren't. "Who said that?" Grim asked. She didn't answer. Her fingers tightened on his vest. "What's your name?" "Willow." "Willow, that's a good name." He kept his voice low, even though every instinct in his body was screaming. "Who's coming back tonight?" She turned her head and looked at the tree line behind them. Rain dripped from the branches. The woods were dark, impossibly dark for 4 in the afternoon. "He said he will come back tonight," she repeated. Grim looked up at Roach, his sergeant-at-arms, a 6'4" former Marine with a beard that could hide a small animal, and hands that had disassembled IEDs in Fallujah. Roach's expression said everything, the kind of expression that comes right before someone gets hurt, and that someone is whoever made this child bleed. "Get the blanket out of my saddlebag," Grim said. Roach moved without a word. They wrapped her in the wool blanket and carried her to the side of the road under the partial cover of a collapsed awning attached to an abandoned gas station. The pumps had been removed years ago. The windows were boarded. Someone had spray-painted "Dead End" across the plywood in letters tall enough to read from the highway. Grim sat on an overturned crate and let Willow stay pressed against his side. She weighed nothing, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in fabric. When he gently moved the jacket away from her left arm, she flinched but didn't pull away. The bruises ran from her wrist to her shoulder, not random, patterned, grip marks. Someone had held her down. Grim's jaw locked so hard he felt his molars crack against each other. "Roach." "Yeah." "Call the sheriff's office." Roach pulled out his phone, dialed, and put it on speaker so the rain and engine noise would fill the background. The dispatcher picked up on the 4th ring with the enthusiasm of someone answering a telemarketer. "Blackwater County Sheriff, what's your emergency?" Roach described the situation. Child found alone on the road, visible injuries, claims someone is threatening her. The dispatcher asked for a location. Roach gave it. There was a pause. "That's out past the old mining district. We don't have a unit available in that area right now." "How long?" "Could be a couple hours, maybe longer. We're dealing with storm-related calls." Roach looked at Grim. Grim looked at the bruises on Willow's arm. "A couple hours," Grim repeated. "Yes, sir. We'll send someone when we can." The line went dead. Nobody spoke for a full 30 seconds. Rain hammered the awning. A gust of wind ripped a piece of plywood from one of the boarded windows and sent it cartwheeling across the parking lot. Pepper, the club's treasurer, a wiry former Army medic who'd done 3 tours and come home with a Purple Heart and a prescription for pills he'd flushed down the toilet 6 months later, knelt in front of Willow and examined her arm with careful, practiced hands. "These aren't fresh," he said quietly. "Some of these are a week old, maybe more. Layers." Grim closed his eyes. When he opened them, the creek water color had frozen into something closer to ice. "We're taking her to the clubhouse." "Grim, she's not sitting on the side of this road for 2 hours waiting for a deputy who might not come." He looked at the other riders. 16 men standing in the rain, beards dripping, leather darkened with water, every one of them watching the little girl who had appeared from nowhere and trusted them more than anyone else in the world. "We get her warm, we get her fed, and we figure out who did this." Nobody argued. They rode slow. Grim kept Willow in front of him on the bike, wrapped in the blanket, her head tucked under his chin. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She pressed one ear against his chest like she was listening for his heartbeat, confirming that the thing protecting her was alive and real and not going to disappear. The clubhouse sat at the end of a gravel road 2 miles outside town. An old warehouse converted over the years into something that was part fortress, part family home, part garage. The main room had a long wooden bar, mismatched chairs, a pool table with a cigarette burn in the felt, and a wall covered with photographs of members past and present. Some of those photographs had black ribbons across the corners. Nobody explained what the ribbons meant. Nobody had to. They brought Willow inside and set her up at the bar with a cup of hot chocolate that Mama Jean, Pepper's wife, who ran the kitchen like a field hospital, made from scratch with real milk and a pinch of cayenne pepper because she believed no child should drink anything that didn't have a little fire in it. Willow held the mug with both hands and stared into the brown surface like it was a window into somewhere safer. Grim pulled Roach and Pepper into the back office. "We need to find out who she belongs to," Roach said. "She belongs to herself," Grim said. "What we need to find out is who she's running from." "She said he. That's all we've got." "She said he's coming back tonight. That means she knows where he'll go. That means there's a home, a location, something." Pepper leaned against the desk. "I looked at those bruises, Grim. Whoever did that knew what they were doing. Kept it where clothes would cover. Systematic. This isn't a drunk stepdad. This is something else." Grim reached for the pack of cigarettes in his vest pocket, then stopped. Not with the kid in the building. He put the pack back. "Run her name through the system. Willow Hart, if that's her real name. Check missing persons, check CPS reports, check school records if you can get them." Roach sat down at the computer, an ancient desktop that sounded like a lawnmower when it booted up, and started typing. It took 20 minutes to find the first thread. Willow Hart, age 8, enrolled at Blackwater Elementary. Mother listed as Evelyn Hart. No father on record. Address: 1147 Ridgeline Road, an unincorporated area near the old mining district. Last school attendance 6 days ago. No truancy report filed. Roach kept digging. Evelyn Hart, age 31, employed part-time at the county records office. Reported missing 3 days ago by a co-worker. Case status: voluntary disappearance. No investigation opened. No search initiated. Voluntary disappearance. Grim said the words like they tasted rotten. A single mother with an 8-year-old daughter voluntarily disappears. That's what the report says. And the daughter turns up 6 days later on the side of a road covered in bruises and blood, and no one noticed she was gone. Silence. Grim walked back to the main room. Willow hadn't moved. The hot chocolate was untouched. Mama Jean sat beside her, not talking, just being there. A warm, solid presence that smelled like flour and coffee, and the kind of safety that doesn't need to announce itself. He pulled a chair up and sat across from her. "Willow, I need to ask you some things, and I need you to tell me the truth. Can you do that?" She looked at him, those ancient eyes in that child's face. "Where's your mom?" "Gone." "Gone where?" He took her. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Or maybe that was just the blood in Grim's veins. "Who took her, Willow?" She shook her head. Not refusal, fear. The kind of fear that crawls into the space between your ribs and curls up like a sleeping animal that will tear you apart if you wake it. "You're safe here. You know that, right? Nobody's going to hurt you in this building." He hurt people who said that before. That sentence landed like a grenade in a quiet room. Mama Jean's hand found Willow's shoulder. The touch was gentle. The expression on Mama Jean's face was not. Grim leaned forward. "Your mom worked at the county records office. Did she find something there? Something she wasn't supposed to find?" Willow's eyes widened. Just a fraction. Just enough. "She found papers," Willow said. "About the mines." "What kind of papers?" "People papers. Names. With numbers." Grim looked at Pepper, who had come back into the room. Pepper's face had gone very still. "She said it was bad people doing bad things," Willow continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She said they were moving people through the mines like packages. She said the man in the big house knew about all of it." "What man?" "The one on TV, the one who gives money to the school." The air in the room changed. Every rider who was listening, and they were all listening, shifted their weight, adjusted their stance, moved their hands closer to their sides. Not because they were scared, because they recognized the shape of the thing they were hearing. A powerful man, a public face, a network hidden beneath respectability. They'd seen this before. In different towns, different states, different decades. The story always had the same skeleton. His name? Willow. Do you know his name? Crane. Mama called him Mr. Crane. Roach was already back at the computer. Victor Crane, age 56, founder and CEO of Crane Industrial Solutions, primary contractor for the county's mining reclamation projects, major donor to local schools, the Children's Hospital, and the sheriff's re-election campaign, board member of 3 civic organizations. Photograph on the company website showed a man with silver hair, a golf tan, and a smile that had been engineered by a public relations firm to project warmth without intimacy. He's connected to everything, Roach said from the back office, loud enough for Grimm to hear. County contracts, political donations. He built half the commercial district downtown. Grimm didn't respond immediately. He watched Willow's face as the name hung in the air between them. Your mama found evidence against this man. And then she disappeared. Willow nodded. Did she tell you where she hid what she found? She said I'd know when I needed to know. And the man who's coming back tonight, is that Crane? Willow shook her head. Not him, his man, the one with the truck, the one who watches our house. Grimm stood up. His knee screamed. He ignored it. Roach, I need everything you can find on Crane's properties. Mining claims, warehouses, anything registered in his name or his company's name. Every building, every lot, every piece of dirt he owns in this county. That's going to take time. Then start now. He turned to the room. The writers had gathered in a loose semicircle around the bar. Some leaned against the wall. Some sat on the pool table. All of them had the same expression. The expression of men who had spent years being told they were the problem, the menace, the danger, and who were now staring at the face of an 8-year-old girl and understanding with absolute clarity who the real monsters were. Nobody calls the cops again, Grimm said. Not yet. They already had their chance. They filed a missing woman as a voluntary walkaway and left her kid to rot. We handle this ourselves until we know who we can trust. And if we can't trust anyone, Pepper asked, then we trust each other. Same as always. Mama Jean took Willow to the upstairs apartment. A small, clean room with a bed, a space heater, and a window that looked out over the back lot where the bikes were parked. She helped the girl out of the muddy jacket, cleaned the blood from her arm, and found a t-shirt large enough to serve as a nightgown. It had the club's logo on the front, a grinning skull wreathed in iron chain. Willow put it on without hesitation. Are they going to find my mama? She asked. Mama Jean tucked the blanket around her. Those men downstairs have pulled people out of places the rest of the world forgot existed. If your mama is out there, they'll find her. The police didn't look. I know. The neighbor said Mama probably ran off with some man. Mrs. DeLacy next door said maybe she deserved whatever happened. Mama Jean's hand froze on the blanket. Her eyes, warm brown eyes that had spent 30 years softening the hard edges of men who came home from war carrying ghosts, went flat and cold. Mrs. DeLacy is wrong. Willow stared at the ceiling. He came to the house the night Mama disappeared. I hid under the bed. I heard them talking. Then I heard Mama screaming. Then the truck drove away and the house was quiet. And you've been alone since then? 3 days. I ate cereal and peanut butter. Then the man came back. He looked through the house. He was looking for what Mama hid. He didn't find it. He was angry. She touched the bruises on her arm. He said he'd be back tonight. He said next time he wouldn't leave until he had what he wanted. Mama Jean stood up and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. You sleep now, baby. Ain't nobody getting through that door tonight who doesn't answer to me first. Downstairs, the mood had shifted. The charity toys still sat in saddlebags, undelivered. The run was over. Something else had begun. Roach had printed everything he could find on Crane's holdings. The map of his properties spread across the bar like a battle plan, and that's exactly what it was. Dozens of parcels scattered across the eastern half of the county, old mining claims, defunct processing facilities, storage warehouses registered to shell companies that traced back to Crane through 2 layers of corporate filings. Look at this, Pepper said, tapping a cluster of properties near the ridgeline area. 6 buildings within 2 miles of Willow's house, all listed as inactive, all transferred to a new LLC 18 months ago. The LLC is called Ridgeline Solutions. Registered agent Victor Crane. What are they being used for? On paper, nothing. Reclamation storage. but the utility records show active electrical service to at least 4 of them, and there's water usage that doesn't match an empty building. Grimm stared at the map. Somewhere in that cluster of abandoned properties, Evelyn Hart was either alive or she wasn't. The evidence she'd hidden was either recoverable or it had already been destroyed. And the man in the truck, Crane's enforcer, his cleanup crew, his problem solver, was planning to return to a house where an 8-year-old girl had been surviving on cereal and peanut butter for 3 days, while the entire apparatus of law enforcement and community support looked the other way. "I need 4 volunteers," Grimm said. "We're going to Ridgeline tonight." Every hand in the room went up. He picked Roach Pepper, a writer named Dutch, who had spent 10 years in Army intelligence before a dishonorable discharge for punching an officer who'd covered up a friendly fire incident, and a prospect named Sawyer, who was 24 years old, quiet as a shadow, and could pick any lock manufactured before 2015. "The rest of you stay here. Lock the gates. Nobody gets in or out without confirmation. If that black truck shows up, you call me, and you do not let anyone near that little girl. And if the truck shows up and the driver gets out," Grimm looked at the man who'd asked, a grizzled rider named Bone, who had been with the club for 20 years and had a face like a topographic map of bad decisions. "Then you make sure he doesn't get back in." They rode out at 9 p.m. The rain had turned to a cold mist that clung to everything: skin, leather, chrome, breath. The road to Ridgeline was unlit. No street lamps, no reflectors. Just the cones of their headlights carving through the dark and the sound of 4 engines growling in harmony against the silence. Willow's house sat at the end of a dirt driveway that branched off Ridgeline Road like a broken finger. Small, 1 story, white paint peeling to gray, a chain-link fence with a gate that didn't latch. The yard was mud. A plastic tricycle, years too small for Willow, but never thrown away, lay on its side near the porch steps. They killed the engines 50 yards out and walked the rest. Grimm took point. The house was dark. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like peanut butter and fear. That particular chemical scent that human terror leaves behind, detectable to anyone who smelled it before, invisible to everyone else. The kitchen was small. Dishes in the sink, a cereal box on the counter, nearly empty, an open jar of peanut butter with a spoon still in it. Willow had been surviving in this kitchen like a soldier in a forward operating base, rationing supplies, staying low, staying quiet, waiting for extraction. Dutch swept the bedrooms. The master bedroom showed signs of a struggle. A lamp knocked from the nightstand, a curtain rod torn from the wall, a smear of something dark on the doorframe that Pepper identified as blood with a penlight and a grim expression. "She fought back," Pepper said. "She fought back and lost," Grimm said. Under the bed in Willow's room, they found a backpack. Inside, 3 granola bars, a water bottle, a flashlight, and a photograph of Evelyn and Willow at what looked like a county fair. Evelyn was laughing. Willow was eating cotton candy. The world in that photograph was a different planet from the one they were standing in now. Grimm held the photograph under his flashlight beam and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Not rage. He had plenty of that, always had. Something older. Something that lived beneath the scar tissue and the dark humor and the carefully maintained indifference. Something that remembered what it felt like to be small and scared and completely alone in a house that was supposed to be safe. He put the photograph in his vest pocket. Sawyer found the hiding spot 20 minutes later. A loose floorboard in the hallway closet, underneath a stack of old shoes. Beneath it, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was a manila envelope thick enough to choke on. Inside, photocopied property records, transfer documents, names and dates and dollar amounts that painted a picture so clear and so ugly that even Dutch, who had spent a decade analyzing intelligence reports in hostile territories, took a step back. Victor Crane was moving people through the abandoned mining properties. The documents showed lease agreements for buildings that didn't officially exist on any county map, transport invoices from a trucking company registered in another state, and a handwritten list of names, 37 names, with dates of arrival and dates of transfer and destinations marked only with codes. "This is a trafficking pipeline," Dutch said. His voice was flat, professional. The voice of a man who had compartmentalized his emotions so efficiently that they only leaked out at 3 in the morning when nobody was watching. She found the operational records, bills of lading for human beings. Grim looked at the list of names. 37 people. Some of the handwriting was shaky, some was precise. Next to 6 of the names, someone had drawn a small X. He didn't ask what the X meant. He already knew. The mist had thickened by the time they left the house. The road was invisible beyond 10 feet. Grim stood by his bike and lit a cigarette, the first in 7 hours, and let the smoke mix with the cold air until he couldn't tell where his breath ended and the tobacco began. His phone buzzed, a text from Bone at the clubhouse. 2 words. Truck. Here. Grim dropped the cigarette. It hissed on the wet ground. They were 15 miles from the clubhouse, 15 miles of unlit road, mist, and darkness. And somewhere at the end of that distance, a man in a black truck had just pulled up to the gate where a little girl was sleeping in a t-shirt with a skull on it, trusting that the monsters outside couldn't reach her. 4 engines roared to life in the dark. The race had begun. 15 miles had never felt like 100 before. Grim pinned the throttle until the engine screamed beneath him like something wounded and furious. The mist ate his headlight beam 3 bike lengths ahead. The road was a guess. Every curve came out of nowhere, a sudden wall of darkness that resolved into asphalt at the last possible second, and each time his front tire held the line by a margin so thin it might as well have been luck. Behind him, Roach, Pepper, and Dutch rode in a tight diamond formation, their headlights stacking into a single moving column of white. Nobody spoke. The wind and the engine swallowed everything. Grim's phone was pressed between his thigh and the tank, the screen glowing with Bone's message like a coal that wouldn't go out. Truck. Here. 2 words. No update. No follow-up. Which meant Bone was either handling the situation or the situation was handling him. 7 minutes. That's what Grim calculated at this speed on this road in this visibility. 7 minutes before he reached the clubhouse gate. 7 minutes during which a man in a black truck was standing between a locked fence and a sleeping child. And the only thing separating them was a handful of bikers who hadn't been told what they were really guarding against. Because Grim hadn't told them everything. He'd said lock the gates. He'd said don't let anyone near the girl. But he hadn't said what was in the manila envelope. He hadn't said the word trafficking. He hadn't said that the man they were protecting Willow from wasn't some angry boyfriend or deadbeat father. He was the operational arm of a machine that moved human beings through underground corridors like inventory through a warehouse. That omission was about to cost him. They heard the clubhouse before they saw it. Not engines, not shouting. A single sound that cut through the mist like a blade through wet paper. A horn. Long, sustained, aggressive. The kind of horn that belongs to a vehicle built for intimidation, not transportation. Grim killed his headlight and coasted the last 200 yards on momentum alone. The others followed. 4 dark shapes gliding through the mist toward the glow of the clubhouse security lights. The black truck was parked sideways across the gravel entrance, its high beams aimed directly at the front gate. The driver's door was open. The engine was running. The horn had stopped. Bone stood on the other side of the gate with a tire iron in his right hand and 2 other riders flanking him. The gate was still locked. Nobody had gotten through, but nobody had left either. Grim rolled his bike to a stop 30 feet behind the truck and dismounted. His boots crunched on gravel. The mist curled around his ankles. "Where is he?" Grim said. Bone didn't take his eyes off the tree line. "Walked into the woods 2 minutes ago. Laid on that horn for a solid 90 seconds, then just left. Walked right into the dark. You get a look at him? Big, 6'2", maybe 6'3", dark jacket, ball cap pulled low. Didn't say a word. Just stood there staring at the building like he was memorizing the layout." Roach moved to the truck. The cab was empty. Registration in the glove box listed the vehicle to a company called Ridgeline Solutions, LLC, Crane's company, the same shell corporation on the property records in the manila envelope. "He's not gone," Dutch said quietly. Dutch had a way of saying things that made the temperature drop. "He came here to confirm the girl's location. He got what he needed. He'll be back with more than a horn." Grim turned to Bone. "Anyone else come by?" Sheriff's deputy rolled past about 40 minutes ago, slowed down, looked at the gate, kept driving, didn't stop, didn't radio in, just looked. That sentence hung in the cold air like an accusation. Grim walked through the gate and into the clubhouse. The main room was lit by the bar neons and a single overhead fluorescent that buzzed like a dying insect. 6 riders were inside, some standing, some sitting, all wearing the particular expression of men who had been told to guard something without being told why. Tex, a 40-year-old Texan who'd served in Army Rangers before a friendly fire cover-up ended his career and his first marriage in the same month, stepped forward. "You gonna tell us what the hell is going on, Grim?" "I told you, protect the girl." "Yeah, you told us protect the girl. You didn't tell us from what. You didn't tell us why a truck registered to the biggest name in this county just parked outside our gate like he owned the place. You didn't tell us why a deputy drove by and eyeballed us without stopping." Tex's voice was controlled, dangerously controlled. The voice of a man who had learned to keep his anger on a very short leash because the alternative involved hospital visits. "So I'm asking again, what the hell is going on?" The room was watching, every rider, every set of eyes. Grim reached into his vest and pulled out the manila envelope. He dropped it on the bar. "Willow's mother found evidence that Victor Crane is running a human trafficking operation through the abandoned mining properties east of town. She hid the evidence. Crane's people took her. They've been looking for what she hid. They found the girl instead." Silence. The fluorescent buzzed. Someone's lighter clicked, then clicked again, failing to catch. Tex picked up the envelope and opened it. He read for 30 seconds. His face didn't change, but his hands did. The knuckles went white, the tendons standing out like cables under the skin. "How long have you known about this?" "Since we searched the house, about 3 hours." 3 hours. Tex set the envelope down. "You've known for 3 hours that we're sitting on evidence against the most powerful man in this county, and you didn't think the rest of us needed that information." "I was working the problem." "You were working the problem. While the rest of us stood at that gate with tire irons, thinking we were dealing with some custody dispute. While a sheriff's deputy drove past and logged our position. While Crane's man rolled up and took pictures of our goddamn clubhouse." Tex took a step closer. "You treated us like foot soldiers, like we were too stupid to handle the full picture." "I was protecting the operation." "No, you were protecting yourself, because you didn't want to have the conversation where someone tells you this is too big for us, because you already know it is." The words landed. Grim felt them hit somewhere behind his sternum, in the place where the truth lives when you're not ready to look at it. Roach stepped between them, not physically. He was too smart for that, but verbally, his deep voice cutting through the tension like a hull through rough water. "We can fight about this later. Right now, we've got a confirmed hostile who knows our location, a sheriff's office that's either compromised or useless, and a missing woman who might still be alive in one of Crane's buildings. So either we argue about chain of command, or we figure out our next move. Pick one." Tex held Grim's gaze for 3 more seconds. Then he stepped back, pulled a cigarette from behind his ear, and lit it with the lighter that had finally decided to work. "Fine. What's the play?" Grim unfolded the map on the bar. The cluster of Crane's properties near Ridgeline spread across the eastern section like a rash. 4 buildings with active utilities. Evelyn Hart is in one of them. We need to search all 4 tonight. "Tonight?" Pepper shook his head. "Grim, we don't know what's in those buildings. We don't know how many people Crane has. We don't have surveillance, we don't have floor plans, we don't have time. Willow said the man told her he'd be back tonight. He already came here. When he doesn't find what he's looking for, he goes to the next option. And the next option is eliminating everyone who knows what's in that envelope." "That includes us now," Bone said from the doorway. "Yeah, it does." Another silence. This one was different. The first silence had been shock. This one was calculation. Every man in the room was doing the math, the risk, the stakes, the cost. Some of them had families. Some of them had warrants. All of them had the same thing in common. They'd been failed by every system that was supposed to work, and they'd rebuilt their lives around the only thing that hadn't failed them, each other. Dutch cleared his throat. He'd been standing in the corner reading the documents from the envelope with the patient, methodical attention of someone who had spent a career analyzing exactly this kind of material. There's a problem with the evidence, he said. Everyone looked at him. These are photocopies, not originals. Any halfway competent lawyer gets these excluded in 5 minutes. And the handwritten list? The names, the dates, the transfer codes? There's no chain of custody, no authentication, nothing tying these documents directly to Crane that would survive a courtroom. So what are you saying? I'm saying if we hand this to the feds right now, Crane's attorneys bury it. They argue the copies were fabricated. They question how a county records clerk had access to private corporate documents. They paint Evelyn Hart as a disgruntled employee with a grudge. Case goes nowhere. Crane walks. And everyone who touched this evidence, including us, becomes a target for retaliation. The fluorescent light above the bar flickered. In the strobe effect, the faces of the riders looked like old photographs, frozen, expressionless, caught between one moment and the next. So we need the originals, Grimm said. We need the originals. And we need Evelyn Hart alive to testify about where she got them and what they represent. Without her, this is just paper. Grimm looked at the map again. 4 buildings. 37 names on a list. A woman who might be alive in one of those buildings and might already be dead. A child sleeping upstairs who had survived 3 days alone on cereal and peanut butter, and who had walked out of the woods and chosen a biker with a broken nose and a bad knee because he was the most dangerous thing she could find, and danger was the only currency that still had value in her world. Then we find her. Mama Jean came downstairs. She moved through the room like weather. Impossible to ignore, impossible to resist. She poured coffee without being asked, set mugs in front of the men closest to her, and then stood at the end of the bar with her arms crossed. That child is awake, she said. She was sleeping. She was. Then she heard the horn. She's sitting up in bed staring at the window. Mama Jean's voice was steady, but her eyes were doing something complicated, cycling through emotions too fast to catalog. She asked me if the man with the truck is here. I told her no. She said, he always comes back. Like she was correcting me. Like I was the one who didn't understand how the world works. Grimm set down his coffee. It was bitter and too hot and exactly what he needed. I'll talk to her. No, not yet. Mama Jean blocked his path. Not with her body, she was half his size, but with her presence, which was considerably larger. You need to hear something first. While you were out, she told me things she didn't tell you. What things? Her mother didn't just find documents. She found people. In one of those buildings near their house. She heard sounds coming from underground, through the walls, through the foundation. She followed the sounds. She found a basement. And in that basement there were people, women, some of them young, very young. Mama Jean's voice cracked on the last word. She caught it, pressed her lips together, and continued. Evelyn didn't just copy documents and hide them. She tried to get help. She went to the sheriff's office. She filed a report. 2 days later, the report disappeared from the system and a man showed up at her house at midnight. The man in the truck. The man in the truck. He told her that if she said another word, Willow would disappear the same way the report did. Evelyn stopped talking, but she didn't stop collecting evidence. She just got quieter about it. Grimm processed this. The room processed this. The information settled over them like a weight, pressing down on shoulders that were already carrying more than most people would ever understand. She went to the cops, Grimm said. She did the right thing. She went to the system. And the system ate her alive. How much does the sheriff know? Mama Jean looked at him with an expression that answered the question without words. Willow said her mother recognized the deputy who visited their house after the report. Same deputy who drove by our gate tonight. Name's Harlan Eccles. Roach pulled up the name on his phone. Deputy Harlan Eccles. Blackwater County Sheriff's Department, 8 years on the force. Prior employment, security consultant for Crane Industrial Solutions. The connection was a straight line. No curves, no ambiguity. He's Crane's man inside the department, Dutch said. That's how the missing persons report got classified as voluntary. That's how the CPS referral never got filed. That's how an 8-year-old girl went missing for 6 days and nobody came looking. Grimm's hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the effort of keeping something inside him contained, something old and hot and destructive that had been building since he crouched in the rain in front of a child who weighed nothing and trusted no one and had walked miles through the woods to find someone dangerous enough to keep her alive. He walked outside. The mist had lifted slightly. The black truck still sat across the entrance, engine off now, headlights dead. It looked like a predator that had settled in to wait. Roach followed him out. They stood side by side in the cold, breath visible, the distant sound of an owl somewhere in the trees. "You know what Tex said in there isn't wrong," Roach said. "I know. You carried this alone for 3 hours. You do that every time. You decide what the rest of us can handle and you ration information like ammunition. And it works until it doesn't. Roach, let me finish." Roach pulled a flask from his vest, took a drink, and offered it. Grim shook his head. "I was in Fallujah with a lieutenant who did the same thing. Good man, smart, brave. Controlled every piece of information that flowed through his unit because he thought he was protecting us from decision fatigue. You know what happened?" Grim didn't answer. 3 of us walked into a building that was rigged because he had intel about the device and decided we didn't need to know. He was trying to confirm it himself first, clear it before we got there. Save us the worry. 2 guys came home in boxes. The owl called again, closer. "I'm not your lieutenant." "No, you're worse, because you actually care about these people, and that makes you hold tighter when you should let go. You can't protect everyone from everything, Grim. Not Willow, not Evelyn, not the club. You try to carry all of it, and something breaks. Something always breaks." Grim stared at the black truck. His reflection was barely visible in the dark glass. A smudge, a shape. Something that could be a man or could be a shadow. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to go back inside and tell those men the whole truth. Every piece of it, including the part where this might get some of us killed, and then let them decide for themselves whether they ride." Grim closed his eyes. The darkness behind his lids was the same darkness in front of them. No difference. No escape. "Okay." He went back inside. He told them everything. The trafficking pipeline, the 37 names, the 6 marks that probably meant what everyone thought they meant, the sheriff's connection to Crane, Deputy Eccles, the fact that Evelyn Hart had tried to do the right thing, and the right thing had tried to kill her. The fact that going after Crane meant going against the entire power structure of Blackwater County, the money, the politics, the law enforcement, the infrastructure, all of it. He told them that some of them might not come back. He told them they didn't have to ride. When he finished, the room was quiet for a long time. Not the tense silence of earlier. Something else. The silence of men sitting with a decision that will define them. Tex spoke first. "My daughter is Willow's age." That was all he said. He picked up his helmet from the bar, put it on, and walked toward the door. One by one, they followed. Bone, Pepper, Sawyer, riders whose names wouldn't make the news and whose faces wouldn't appear in any report. Men who limped from old injuries and flinched at loud noises and woke up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat. Men who had been discharged, discarded, divorced, and forgotten. Men who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Every single one of them walked toward the door. Grim watched them go. Something moved in his chest. Not the old, hot, destructive thing. Something else. Something he didn't have a name for because he'd spent so many years building walls against it that he'd forgotten what it felt like when it pushed through. Mama Jean appeared at his side. That girl upstairs heard every word. Grim turned. Willow stood at the top of the stairs, the oversized skull t-shirt hanging past her knees, her bare feet on the cold wood. She wasn't crying. She was watching the men file out with an expression that belonged on a face 4 times her age. "You're going to find my mama," she said. It wasn't a question. Grim looked up at her. The light from the bar caught the scar across his eyebrow and the lines around his eyes, and the gray that had started creeping into his beard when he wasn't paying attention. "Yeah, Willow, we are. The man in the truck will try to stop you." "I know. He stops everyone. He stopped the police. He stopped the neighbors. He stopped Mama." Grim climbed 3 stairs, then 4. He stopped close enough that Willow could see his eyes clearly in the dim light. "He hasn't stopped us yet." Willow studied his face the way children study faces, completely, without pretense, without the social filters that adults use to smooth over what they're really thinking. "You're scared," she said. "Yeah." "But you're still going." "That's what scared looks like when it decides to move." She reached out and touched the patch on his vest, the Iron Reaper's insignia, frayed at the edges, faded by years of road dust and weather. Her fingers traced the outline of the skull and chain. "Mama said to find the bikers." She was right. Grim put his hand over hers. His hand was enormous compared to her fingers, scarred, calloused, trembling slightly. A hand built for violence that was, in this moment, doing the most difficult thing it had ever done, being gentle. "Go back to bed. Mama Jean's going to stay with you. We'll be back before morning." "Promise?" He hesitated, because promises were currency he'd spent too freely in the past. To ex-wives, to brothers who didn't come home, to himself in the dark hours of the night when the shrapnel in his knees sang along with the ghosts in his head. "I promise." He walked down the stairs and through the bar and out the door. The cold hit his face. The mist had thinned enough that he could see the line of motorcycles parked along the gravel, chrome gleaming under the security lights like the teeth of something waiting to bite. His phone buzzed. A text from Dutch, who had been running the registration on the black truck through every database he still had access to. The message read, "Truck registered to Ridgeline Solutions. GPS tracker found under the dash. It's broadcasting our location. They know we're here. They know how many we are. They've known the whole time." Grim stared at the message. The truck wasn't just reconnaissance. It wasn't just intimidation. It was a beacon, a signal fire planted in their front yard, telling Crane exactly where his enemies were gathered and exactly how long they'd been standing still. Every minute they'd spent arguing, planning, deciding, Crane had been listening, not to their words, to their position, to their hesitation, to the gap between discovery and action that powerful men exploit the way surgeons exploit the gap between skin and bone. And somewhere in the dark, in one of those 4 buildings with active utilities and impossible water usage, Evelyn Hart was running out of time. Because Crane didn't need to send the man in the truck back tonight. He already knew exactly where Willow was. What he needed now was to make sure her mother never spoke again. Grim mounted his bike. The engine caught on the first kick. "Move. Now. All of us. Every building. We split and we search, and we do not stop until we find her." 22 motorcycles roared to life in the dark. The sound rolled across Blackwater County like a warning, a deep, sustained growl that rattled windows and houses 5 miles away and sent animals running from the tree line and made Deputy Harlan Eccles, sitting in his patrol car at the edge of town with his phone pressed to his ear, stop mid-sentence and listen. He recognized the sound. Everyone in Blackwater recognized the sound. The Iron Reapers were riding, and they weren't riding for charity anymore. Eccles looked at his phone, at the name on the screen, at the 3 words he'd been about to say. "Situation is contained," that were no longer true. He deleted the words. He typed new ones. "They're coming." Then he pulled onto the road and followed the sound into the dark, because a man who serves 2 masters eventually has to choose, and Harlan Eccles had made his choice a long time ago. The night Victor Crane handed him an envelope thick with cash and said the words that had owned him ever since. "You're mine now, deputy, and mine don't get to leave." The convoy split at the Ridgeline Junction. 2 groups, 2 roads, 4 buildings, and somewhere between the engines and the mist and the cold and the dark, the sound of something cracking. Not wood, not metal, not bone, but the brittle shell of a lie that had kept a county quiet for years and was about to shatter into pieces too small to ever put back together. There was no going back now. Not for Grim. Not for the Brotherhood. Not for Crane. And not for the woman locked in the dark, listening to the distant rumble of engines getting closer, pressing her hands against the cold concrete wall, and whispering the same thing she'd told her daughter weeks ago. The instruction that had saved Willow's life and was now, against every odd and every prayer, about to save her own. Find the bikers. The convoy split like a fist opening into fingers. 11 bikes peeled left toward the 2 northern properties, an abandoned processing plant and a storage facility half buried in the hillside. Grim took the remaining 11 right, toward the southern cluster where the utility records showed the heaviest electrical draw and the water usage that didn't belong to empty buildings. The road dissolved into gravel within a quarter mile. Then the gravel dissolved into dirt. Then the dirt became something that wasn't a road at all, just two ruts carved into the earth by vehicles that came and went in the dark. Vehicles that never used headlights and never stayed long enough for anyone to ask questions. Grim killed his headlight. Behind him, 10 other lights went dark in sequence, like stars winking out across a dying sky. They rode by moonlight and memory and the faint glow of instrument panels. The engines throttled low, rumbling through the mist like the heartbeat of something enormous moving underground. The first building appeared through the trees at 11:47 p.m., a concrete block structure with a corrugated metal roof and no windows. Loading dock on the east side, steel door on the north, and a chain-link fence topped with razor wire that looked far too new for a building that was supposed to be abandoned. A single floodlight mounted above the loading dock cast a yellow cone across the gravel lot, and in that cone sat two vehicles, a white cargo van with no plates, and a gray sedan with tinted windows. Grim raised his fist. The column stopped. Engines died one by one, until the only sound was the mist settling on leather and the distant hum of the floodlight's transformer. He dismounted and moved to the fence line with Roach and Dutch. Sawyer drifted left, circling the perimeter with the practiced silence of someone who had learned to make himself invisible long before he had a reason to. "Two vehicles," Dutch whispered. "That means at least two people inside, maybe more. Could be empty, could have been left here. Cargo van with no plates isn't left anywhere. It's staged." Grim studied the building. No sound from inside. No movement. The steel door had a padlock on the exterior, which meant it was locked from outside, which meant whatever was inside wasn't meant to leave. Or whoever. Sawyer appeared at his shoulder like smoke given shape. "East side has a ventilation shaft. Grates rusted. I can get through." "No, not yet." Grim pointed at the sedan. "Run that plate." "Yes." Sawyer photographed the plate with his phone and sent it to Pepper, who was holding position at the road junction with the comm equipment, a collection of burner phones and a police scanner that crackled with the mundane traffic of a county that had no idea what was happening in its own backyard. The response came in 90 seconds. "Sedan registered to Blackwater County Sheriff's Department. Pool vehicle, assigned to Deputy H. Eccles." The air left Grim's lungs like he'd been gut-punched. Eccles wasn't just following them. He was already here, at the building, at the place where Crane's operation breathed and fed and consumed people whose names became entries on a handwritten list. "He beat us here," Roach said. The words carried a weight that had nothing to do with volume. "He didn't beat us. He was already coming. He was always coming. This is his route." Dutch's voice had gone cold and analytical, the emotional shudders dropping over whatever was behind them. "This is part of his job. Whatever he does for Crane, this building is on his rounds." Grim's mind raced through the implications. A deputy sheriff making midnight visits to an off-grid building owned by a trafficking network. A deputy who had driven past the clubhouse to confirm the biker's location. A deputy who had texted Crane the words, "They're coming," and then followed the convoy into the dark. "He followed us," Grim said. "He followed us and then passed us. He knows a faster route. Which means he knows this area better than we do. Which means he's done this before. Many times." Roach's hand moved to his belt. Not a weapon. A flashlight. Heavy duty. The kind that doubles as a baton. Old habits from the Marine Corps. Always carry something that serves two purposes. "So, what do we do?" "He's a cop. We can't. He's not a cop right now." Grim's voice came from somewhere deeper than his throat. Somewhere in the basement of himself, where the things he didn't talk about lived alongside the things he couldn't forget. A cop doesn't make midnight runs to an unregistered building where people are held against their will. Whatever badge he carries, right now he's just another man in the dark doing things he doesn't want witnesses for. They moved to the steel door. Sawyer worked the padlock in under a minute. A tubular pin tumbler, old, corroded, no match for the tension wrench and pick he carried in a leather roll that fit inside his vest like a surgeon's kit. The door swung open on hinges that screamed. Inside, a corridor. Concrete walls. Fluorescent lights, half of them dead. the other half flickering in irregular patterns that made the shadows jump and stutter. The air smelled like diesel fuel and bleach and something underneath both of those that Grimm recognized from a place he never wanted to remember. Human confinement. That particular smell. Sweat and fear and waste and the slow chemical breakdown of hope. He'd smelled it in a basement in Kandahar where they'd found 6 men chained to a wall, and he'd smelled it in a container ship in San Diego Harbor during a joint operation that nobody talked about afterward because the things they found inside made 3 seasoned Marines vomit on the dock. He was smelling it now. In a building 20 miles from a county seat in the American heartland, they moved down the corridor single file. Grimm first, Roach second, Dutch third, Sawyer covering the rear. 4 men in a concrete tunnel following a smell toward something that was going to change them whether they wanted it to change them or not. The corridor ended at a T-junction. Left led to the loading dock. Right led downward. A ramp, descending into the earth at an angle that suggested this building had been built on top of something older. A mine shaft, maybe. Or a basement excavated during construction and never filled. Voices. Faint. Coming from below. One voice Grimm didn't recognize. Deep. Calm. The cadence of someone giving instructions to someone who had no choice but to follow them. The other voice he recognized. Eccles. Cleaned out by tomorrow afternoon. Crane wants everything moved to the Dalton site before the weekend. The county inspector is doing his annual drive-through on Monday, and he doesn't want to explain why the water bill looks like a goddamn swimming pool. What about the ones downstairs? Transport's coming at 4 a.m., 2 vans. They go to the Dalton site with everything else. All of them? A pause. The quality of the pause, the texture of it, the density, told Grimm everything about what was being discussed, and what all of them meant, and why the answer required a moment of consideration. The ones that can move. The rest, Crane said, use the shaft. Mine's scheduled for demolition Friday. Nobody's going to dig. Grimm's hand found the wall. He pressed his palm flat against the cold concrete and held himself there because something inside him was trying to move, trying to go down that ramp at full speed, trying to reach the source of those voices and the source of that smell and the people whose lives were being discussed like inventory management. Roach grabbed his arm. Hard. The grip said, not yet. The grip said, think. The grip said, if you go down there now, you might save some of them and lose all of us. Grimm breathed, in, out. The air tasted like diesel and bleach and the end of something he couldn't name. They retreated to the corridor, back through the steel door, into the cold air and the mist and the relative sanity of a world that still had a sky above it. We heard enough, Dutch said. His voice had changed. The professional coldness was cracking. Underneath it was something raw. Not anger, not grief, but the particular devastation of a man who has spent his career believing that information is power and has just discovered that some information doesn't empower you. It breaks you. They're moving people. They're disposing of the ones who can't be moved, and they're doing it before Monday. We need to go down there, Roach said. Not with 4 men, not with Eccles and whoever else is down there, not without knowing the layout. There are people in that building, right now, tonight. I know. Dutch's hands were shaking. He shoved them into his jacket pockets. And if we storm down there and it goes wrong, those people die faster. Crane's operation panics and everyone in every building gets erased. Grimm pulled out his phone and called Tex, who was leading the northern group. What did you find? Tex's voice came through tight and flat. Processing plant is empty, cleaned out, recently. There are drag marks on the floor and bleach stains on the concrete. Somebody sanitized this place in the last 48 hours. They're consolidating, moving everything to 2 locations, this building and something called the Dalton site. You hear of it? No, but I can ask around. Don't ask. Search. Check Crane's property records for anything with Dalton in the name. Grimm. Tex's voice dropped. The storage facility on the hill. It's not storage. It's a comm station. Antenna on the roof, satellite dish, encrypted radio equipment. Military grade. Someone's running communications out of here. Military grade? Surplus, the kind of stuff that disappeared from bases in Afghanistan and showed up on the black market. I've seen this exact setup, same manufacturer, same mounting brackets. Whoever outfitted this place had access to equipment that doesn't exist on the civilian market. The implications stacked like sandbags in Grimm's mind. This wasn't a local operation. This wasn't a businessman who'd found a profitable side venture in human misery. This was infrastructure, purpose-built, professionally equipped, designed to move and track and communicate across distances that a small-town trafficking ring wouldn't need. Victor Crane wasn't running the operation. He was hosting it. Someone much larger, much more dangerous, and much more invisible was running the operation through Crane's properties, using his local connections, his political cover, his network of compliant officials. Crane was the storefront. The real business was somewhere behind the walls. Grimm leaned against his bike. The metal was cold. The seat was wet. None of it mattered. Dutch, that list of names in the envelope, 37 people, 6 with X marks. Yeah. How long has this been going on? Dutch was quiet for a moment. Based on the dates on the documents, at least 3 years. The earliest transfer record is dated 34 months ago. 3 years. 37 names that Evelyn found. How many names didn't she find? Nobody answered, because the answer was a number none of them wanted to calculate. Grimm's phone buzzed again. Pepper, from the road junction. Grimm, we've got movement. 2 vehicles coming up Ridgeline Road from the south, moving fast, no headlights. What vehicles? Can't see clearly. Dark paint, SUV type. They're heading toward your position. Grimm looked at the building. At Eccles' sedan parked under the floodlight. At the white cargo van with no plates. At the steel door that was now standing open because they hadn't locked it behind them, and in approximately 3 minutes, whoever was in those SUVs was going to see that open door and know that the building had been breached. Move the bikes. Now. Into the tree line. Kill everything. Phones, lights, everything. They moved with the desperate efficiency of men who have been ambushed before and know that the difference between survival and extinction is measured in seconds, not minutes. 11 motorcycles pushed off the road and into the undergrowth, engines cold, chrome covered with jackets and blankets, anything to kill the reflection. Grimm crouched behind a fallen oak and watched. The 2 SUVs pulled into the lot at 11:59 p.m. Black. Identical. Government surplus by the look of them. Reinforced bumpers, blacked out windows, the kind of tires that cost more than most people's monthly rent. 4 men got out, not locals. The way they moved said military or paramilitary. Tactical spacing, constant visual scanning, economy of motion. They wore dark clothing, no insignia, and 2 of them carried long cases that could have held fishing rods but didn't. The steel door. They saw it immediately. Open. One of them raised a hand. The others froze. A flashlight beam swept the lot. It passed over the fence, the gravel, the van, the sedan. It lingered on the tire tracks in the mud where 11 motorcycles had been parked 2 minutes ago. The man with the flashlight lowered it and spoke into a radio. The words were inaudible at this distance, but the tone was unmistakable. The clipped, controlled cadence of someone reporting a security breach to someone who didn't tolerate surprises. The 4 men entered the building. 2 minutes later, Eccles came out, alone, moving fast. He got into his sedan, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot with his headlights off. His rear tires through gravel. He turned south on Ridgeline Road and disappeared. "He's running," Roach whispered. "No," Dutch said. "He's reporting. He's going to Crane. Those men in there just escalated this above Eccles' pay grade, and Eccles is going to the one person who can tell him what to do. Then we follow him." "No, we follow them." Dutch pointed at the building. "Those men are here to move the cargo. The people in that basement. If we follow Eccles, we find Crane, but we lose the victims." The word hung in the mist like a held breath. Grimm looked at Dutch, then at Roach, then at the building where 4 men with military training and long cases were now doing whatever they had come to do to the people in the basement. "We can't do both," Pepper said through the phone, his voice barely audible. "We don't have the numbers." "We never had the numbers. We had 18 guys on a toy run this afternoon. Now we've got 22 men scattered across 2 locations trying to dismantle something that was built by people with more money, more guns, and more connections than we'll ever have." Grimm's voice was raw, stripped. The voice of a man standing at the edge of a decision that would define every day he had left. We were never supposed to win this. A little girl walked out of the woods and we thought we could fix it. We can't fix it. Not tonight. Not by ourselves. So what? We walk away? No. Grim pulled out the manila envelope. The photocopies. The names. The evidence that was too fragile for a courtroom but too real to ignore. We call the only people who outrank Crane, outgun those soldiers, and don't answer to the Blackwater Sheriff's Department. Feds, Roach said. FBI field office in Ashford, 50 miles east. We get this envelope to them tonight. In person, not over the phone, not through a fax that Eccles can intercept. And we let them know what's happening in these buildings right now, before 4 a.m., before the transport vans arrive. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we watch every building, every vehicle, every person who enters and exits. We document everything. Plates, faces, timestamps. We build the case that the photocopies alone can't make. Dutch nodded slowly. That's smart. That's the right play. That's the coward's play, Bone said. He'd been silent until now, crouched behind a tree with his tire iron across his knees, and the voice that came out of him was quiet and terrible. There are people in that basement right now, Grim, breathing, scared, waiting for someone to open a door that doesn't open. And you're telling me we sit out here in the bushes and take photographs? I'm telling you that if we go in there with 22 men against trained operators and we lose, nobody finds those people. Nobody stops the transport. Nobody tells the world what's happening here. We die in the mud, and Crane buries us in the same shaft he's planning to bury them in. And if the feds don't come, if they're as compromised as the sheriff, then we come back, with everyone we've got, and we tear this place apart with our bare hands. Bone stared at him. The tire iron rotated slowly in his grip. Then he stood, shoved the iron into his belt, and walked back to his bike without another word. Grim sent Dutch east with Sawyer in a truck borrowed from a prospect's cousin. Anonymous, untraceable, fast. They carried the envelope, photographs of the building and the SUVs, and a USB drive containing everything Roach had pulled from public records about Crane's corporate structure. The rest of them settled into positions around the building. Engines off, phones dark, watching. At 1:14 a.m., Grim's burner phone vibrated with a call from a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Grim. The voice was male, smooth, controlled. The voice of a man who had never raised it because he'd never needed to. My name is Victor Crane. I believe you have something that belongs to me. The mist pressed against Grim's face. His heartbeat slowed. I don't know what you're talking about. The girl, Willow Hart. She's in your clubhouse right now wearing a t-shirt with your club's insignia, drinking hot chocolate made by a woman named Jean Marie Costello. Shall I continue? I can tell you which room she's sleeping in. I can tell you which window faces the parking lot. I can tell you that there are currently 4 men inside your clubhouse and 2 more at the gate, and that the nearest law enforcement response to your location is 43 minutes away. Grim's blood froze. Not a figure of speech. He felt the temperature change in his veins, the physical sensation of cold spreading from his chest outward. What do you want? I want the documents Evelyn Hart stole from my office. I want them returned within the hour. And I want the girl. You're not getting the girl. Then let me explain what happens next. At this moment, 3 of my associates are parked outside your clubhouse. If I make one phone call, they enter the building and retrieve the child. The 4 men and 2 women inside will not be able to prevent this. You know that. I know that. The only variable is how much damage is done in the process. Grim closed his eyes. Mama Jean. Willow. The riders he'd left behind. Men he'd chosen specifically because they were older, steadier, less likely to start something they couldn't finish. Men who were now outgunned by professionals. If you touch that child, I have no interest in hurting the child. I have interest in recovering property and eliminating a legal liability. Give me the documents. I'll leave the girl alone. I'll leave your club alone. Everyone walks away. And Evelyn? Silence. 3 seconds. 5. 7. Evelyn Hart is no longer a factor in this equation. The words landed like a coffin lid closing. You killed her. I've ended this call. You have 55 minutes. The line went dead. Grim stood in the dark with the phone against his ear, listening to nothing. The mist moved around him. An engine hummed somewhere far away. One of the SUVs, maybe, or the generator inside the building, or the sound of a world continuing to function while everything inside him came apart at the seams. Evelyn Hart was dead. The mother Willow was waiting for. The woman who had found the evidence and tried to do the right thing and been consumed by the machine she'd tried to expose. Dead. Gone. A body in a building or a shaft or a hole in the ground that nobody would find because nobody was looking, and nobody would look because the man who killed her owned the people who were supposed to look. And Crane knew everything: the clubhouse location, the number of defenders, the room where Willow slept. He had surveillance capabilities that went beyond a truck with a GPS tracker. He had infrastructure, eyes, a network that had been watching the Iron Reapers from the moment Willow stepped onto that road. Grim's hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of holding himself together when every cell in his body wanted to explode outward in a violence so pure and so absolute that it would erase Victor Crane from the surface of the earth. But violence wasn't enough. Not tonight. Tonight, violence would get Willow killed. He called Roach. Get everyone back to the clubhouse, right now, every rider within reach. I need every man we have inside those walls in the next 30 minutes. What happened? Crane called me. He knows where Willow is. He has men outside the clubhouse right now. He's given us 55 minutes to hand over the evidence and the girl. And Evelyn? Grim's throat locked. Grim. Evelyn. She's gone, Roach. The silence on the other end of the phone was the worst sound Grim had ever heard. Worse than gunfire. Worse than explosions. The silence of a man processing the information that the rescue mission they'd been fighting for all night had already failed before it began. That the woman they were racing to save was already beyond saving. That the little girl sleeping in a skull t-shirt upstairs was now and would always be alone. Get to the clubhouse, Grim said. We protect what's left. He mounted his bike. The engine roared. The sound meant something different now. Not a war cry, not a charge, but a scream. The scream of a man who had promised a child he would bring her mother home and was riding back to tell her that the world had broken another promise, that the system had failed another time, that the monsters were real and the good guys didn't always win, and the only thing standing between her and the darkness was a group of damaged men on old motorcycles who were making it up as they went along, 15 miles. Again. But this time the road felt like it was collapsing behind him, like the asphalt was crumbling into the dark the moment his rear tire cleared it, and there was nothing left to go back to. Only forward, only the clubhouse, only the girl, only the conversation he had no idea how to have. He pulled into the lot at 1:41 a.m. The gate was intact. The security lights were on, and sitting in the parking lot, engine running, windows dark, was a vehicle he hadn't expected, not one of Crane's SUVs, a federal sedan, blue and white, U.S. government plates. And leaning against the hood, arms crossed, wearing a windbreaker with 3 letters on the back that changed everything, was a woman Grim had never seen before. She was maybe 40, short dark hair, a face built for hard conversations. She straightened when the motorcycles pulled in, and her hand moved to her hip, not drawing, just confirming, before settling back at her side. Jace Holloway, she said. Not a question. Who's asking? She held up a badge. Special Agent Dana Mercer, FBI, Organized Crime Task Force. She glanced at the line of motorcycles behind him, at the riders dismounting with expressions that ranged from exhaustion to fury, to the blank stare of men who have processed too much information in too little time. We need to talk. And we need to talk now, because Victor Crane just filed a complaint with the Blackwater Sheriff's Department alleging that your motorcycle club kidnapped a child, and there are 2 deputies en route to this location with a warrant to search the premises. That's a lie. The girl came to us. I know, because I've been investigating Crane for 11 months, and the woman who was helping me, the woman who was gathering evidence inside his operation at my request, was Evelyn Hart. The world stopped. The engines stopped. The mist stopped. Grim's heartbeat stopped. She was your informant. She was my asset, My source. The only person inside Crane's network willing to risk everything to bring it down. And 48 hours ago, she went dark. No contact, no dead drops, nothing. Agent Mercer's voice cracked. Just barely. Just enough to reveal that the professional mask she wore was exactly that. A mask, and underneath it was someone who had sent a young mother into the mouth of a machine and was now standing in a parking lot at 2 in the morning, wondering if she'd killed her. I've been trying to reach her ever since. Your club is the first lead I've had. She's dead, Grimm said. Mercer's face didn't change, but her hands did. They tightened into fists at her sides, the knuckles going white, the tendons standing out like bridge cables. How do you know? Crane told me, 20 minutes ago, on the phone. He called you. He called me and told me Evelyn is no longer a factor. His words. He wants the document she hid, and he wants the girl. He's given us a deadline. How long? About 35 minutes now. Mercer looked at the clubhouse, at the windows, at the upstairs room where a light was still on, the room where Willow Hart was sitting in a dead woman's daughter's life, waiting for news that would destroy what was left of her childhood. The documents you have, are they the originals? Photocopies. The originals are still hidden. Willow said her mother told her she'd know where to find them when she needed to. Then the girl is the key to everything. She's the only person alive who can lead us to the original evidence. Without that, my 11-month investigation dies tonight. Grimm stared at her. You want to use her? I want to save her, and I want to put Victor Crane in a cell for the rest of his life. Those two things require the same thing, keeping that child safe and finding the evidence her mother died to protect. The deputies were coming, Crane's men were watching, the clock was running. And somewhere in the dark, in the buildings on Ridgeline, people were being loaded into vans for transport to a place where nobody would ever find them. Grimm looked at the clubhouse door, through it, past the bar and the photographs and the pool table with the cigarette burn, up the stairs and down the hall. A little girl was sitting in a bed that wasn't hers, wearing a shirt that wasn't hers, waiting for a mother who wasn't coming back. And the only thing between her and the total, irreversible collapse of everything was a man who had spent his entire adult life protecting people the world had given up on, and who was now being asked to trust a system he had never trusted, with the life of a child he had promised to save. He turned to Mercer. You've got 5 minutes. Tell me exactly what you need. And if I believe you, we do this together. But the girl doesn't leave this building. She doesn't become a witness, a tool, a chess piece, or a line in your report. She's a kid. And tonight, she's ours. Mercer met his eyes. 5 minutes, she said. That's more than I need. Behind them, the distant sound of sirens began to build. Thin, sharp, getting closer. The deputies. Crane's deputies. Coming with a warrant and a lie and the full weight of a corrupted system aimed at one building, one girl, and the broken men who had become her only wall against a darkness that was closing from every side. Grimm turned to Roach. Lock the gate. Everyone inside. Defensive positions. Against cops? Grimm looked at the sirens, at the dark tree line, at the federal agent standing in his parking lot, at the world that had spent his entire life telling him he was the wrong kind of person to save anyone. Against whatever comes through that gate. The sirens grew louder. The mist thickened, and inside the clubhouse, in a small room above the bar, Willow Hart pressed her face to the window and watched the blue lights approaching through the dark. And she did not scream, and she did not cry. And she did not run, because running was something you did when there was still somewhere safe to run to, and the last safe place she had was surrounded. The sirens died at the gate. 2 patrol cars, headlights cutting through the mist like surgical blades. They parked nose to nose across the gravel entrance, and for a long moment nothing moved, just the idle of the engines and the slow sweep of the light bars painting the fence line in alternating blue and red. Grimm stood inside the gate with Roach on his left and Bone on his right. Behind them, 16 riders formed a loose wall across the clubhouse entrance. They weren't armed. They didn't need to be. 18 men standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark carry a weight that has nothing to do with weapons. Agent Mercer stood slightly apart, her badge clipped to the front of her windbreaker, her phone already open to a number she hadn't dialed yet. The driver's door of the lead patrol car opened. Deputy Harlan Eccles stepped out. He was tall, taller than Grimm remembered from Bone's description, with a jaw that looked like it had been designed by someone who confused stubbornness with strength. His uniform was pressed, his belt was heavy. His hand rested on the holster at his hip with the casual familiarity of someone who had never been afraid of the thing strapped to his thigh because he'd never used it against anyone who could fight back. Jace Holloway, Deputy. I have a warrant to search these premises for a minor child, Willow Hart, reported as abducted from her home and held against her will. Eccles held up a folded document. His voice was loud enough to carry across the lot, which meant it was a performance, which meant there was an audience beyond the bikers. Dashcam, body camera, the record that would justify whatever happened next. Grimm didn't move. The child wasn't abducted. She came to us voluntarily. She was found alone on the road, injured, and her mother has been reported missing. You know this because you're the deputy who classified that missing persons case as voluntary. Eccles' jaw tightened. The performance flickered. I'm not here to debate case classifications. I'm here to execute a warrant. Step aside or you're obstructing justice. Justice. Grimm let the word sit in the air. He wanted Eccles to hear it echo. He wanted him to feel the specific weight of that word in his mouth and know that every person listening could taste the difference between the word and the man using it. You want to talk about justice, Deputy? Let's talk about the sedan registered to your name that was parked at a Crane Industrial Building on Ridgeline at 11:47 tonight. Let's talk about the midnight visits. Let's talk about what's in the basement of that building and why the water bill doesn't match an empty structure. Eccles' hand moved on the holster. Not drawing, adjusting. The gesture of a man who suddenly feels the weight of what he's carrying. I don't know what you're... Special Agent Dana Mercer, FBI. Mercer stepped forward and held her badge at arm's length, directly in the line of the dash cam. Deputy, I'm conducting an active federal investigation into human trafficking operations connected to Victor Crane and properties registered to Ridgeline Solutions, LLC. Your warrant was obtained through a complainant who is the primary target of that investigation. I'm advising you to stand down. Eccles looked at the badge, then at Mercer, then at Grimm, then at the second patrol car where his partner, a younger deputy, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet, was gripping the steering wheel with both hands and staring straight ahead. I have a valid warrant. You have a warrant signed by a judge at 1 a.m. based on a complaint filed by a man currently under federal investigation for trafficking in persons. I can have that warrant reviewed and quashed within the hour. Or you can try to execute it and spend the next 6 months explaining to an internal affairs board why you served a fraudulent warrant on behalf of a criminal enterprise. Mercer's voice never rose above conversational volume. She didn't need it to. She had the tone of someone who had ended careers before and would do it again without losing sleep. Your choice, Deputy. Make it fast. The mist drifted between them. The light bars kept spinning. Eccles stood there for 11 seconds. Grimm counted. 11 seconds of a man calculating the distance between the life he'd built on Crane's money and the cell that was waiting for him at the end of every road he could see. He got back in his car. Both patrol cars reversed out of the lot and disappeared down the road, the sirens silent. The lights killed before they reached the first curve. Mercer lowered her badge and let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 11 months. That bought us maybe an hour, she said. Eccles is calling Crane right now. When Crane finds out the FBI is here, he won't try the legal route again. He'll go direct. How direct? The men in those SUVs at the Ridgeline building aren't civilian security. They're contractors, ex-military. Crane uses them for situations that can't be resolved through corruption. She turned to Grimm. He will send them here, and they won't knock. Grimm looked at the clubhouse, at the windows, at the upstairs light where Willow was watching. How many? Based on what I've seen over 11 months, he has access to 8 to 12 operators. 4 were at the Ridgeline building, the rest are probably at the Dalton site or en route. Where is the Dalton site? Mercer pulled up a map on her phone. 12 miles northeast, an old mineral processing complex. 3 buildings, a loading area, and an underground facility connected to the original mine shaft network. That's where Crane moves the transport vehicles. It's his primary staging point. That's where the vans are going at 4 a.m. Yes, and that's where the original evidence likely is. Evelyn told me she'd hidden copies of everything, but the original documents were in a location only she and Willow could access. She never told me where. Compartmentalization. She was smarter than anyone gave her credit for. Grim processed this. The clock in his head was counting down from an hour. Less, probably. Crane was a man who moved fast when cornered, and the FBI badge at his front gate was the kind of corner that accelerated every timeline. I need to talk to Willow. Mercer hesitated. She's 8 years old and she just lost her mother. I'm not sure. I promised her I'd tell her the truth. I'm not going to break that promise by letting someone else decide what she can handle. He walked inside. The clubhouse was quiet in the way that buildings get quiet when the people inside them are holding their breath. Writers lined the walls, some sitting, some standing, all of them carrying the particular exhaustion of men who have been running on adrenaline for 8 hours and are starting to feel the debt. Grim climbed the stairs. Each step sent a spike of pain through his right knee. The shrapnel singing its old song, louder now, as if it knew that the body carrying it was approaching its limit. Mama Jean sat in the chair outside Willow's room. Her eyes were dry, but her hands were clasped in her lap so tightly that her knuckles looked like they might come through the skin. She heard the sirens, Mama Jean said. I know. She didn't cry. She just sat there watching the window and said, they're coming for me. Like she's known her whole life that this is how it works. Someone comes, someone takes, someone disappears. Grim put his hand on Mama Jean's shoulder. She covered his hand with hers. The contact lasted 2 seconds. It said everything that words would have gotten wrong. He opened the door. Willow was sitting on the edge of the bed with her feet dangling above the floor. The skull t-shirt, the bare feet, the eyes that had seen too much and processed too little and stored everything in a place that would take years to reach and decades to empty. He pulled the chair from the corner and sat in front of her, close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd. Willow, you didn't find her. Not a question, a statement, delivered with the flat certainty of a child who had learned to read adult faces the way soldiers read terrain, constantly, automatically, scanning for the danger that the words were trying to hide. No. She's dead. Grim's throat closed. He forced it open. I don't know that for certain. The man who took her, Crane, he said something on the phone that makes me think she's gone. But I didn't see her. I didn't find her. And until I do, I'm not going to tell you something I don't know for sure. Willow's hands were flat on the bed beside her thighs. Small hands, fingers splayed, pressing down as if she could anchor herself to the mattress, and the mattress to the floor, and the floor to the earth, and keep everything from flying apart. You promised you'd bring her home. I did. You can't. I don't know that yet. I know. Her voice didn't break. It simply went somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath the register that 8-year-old voices are supposed to reach. I knew when the man in the truck came to our house, and Mama screamed and the door slammed. I knew. I just didn't want to know. Grim leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands hanging between his legs because he didn't trust them to do anything useful. Not hold, not comfort, not fix. There's a woman downstairs. FBI. She was working with your mama, trying to stop Crane. Your mama was helping her. She was brave, Willow. She was the bravest person in this whole story. She was scared, all the time. She just didn't stop. That's what brave is. Willow looked at him, through him, past the scar and the broken nose and the creekwater eyes to whatever was behind all of it. The thing that made him ride through the dark for a stranger's child. The thing that made him promise things he couldn't guarantee. The thing that was breaking inside him right now while he sat in this chair trying to hold a world together with hands that had been trained to take worlds apart. Mama said I'd know where the papers are when I needed to know. Do you? Do you know? The fair? Willow's eyes moved to the photograph that Grim had taken from her house. The county fair, the cotton candy, the laughing mother. He'd placed it on the nightstand when they'd set up the room. The day that picture was taken, Mama won a stuffed bear at the ring toss. Big, brown. She said it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to her. She kept it on the shelf in my room. The bear. She opened the seam on the back and put papers inside. She sewed it shut. She said if anything happened, I should give the bear to someone who could help. Grim stood up. His knee buckled. He caught himself on the chair. The bear is at your house? On the shelf. In my room. Unless he found it. Grim was out the door and down the stairs in seconds. The pain in his knee was a distant signal, like a radio station bleeding through from another frequency. He found Mercer at the bar. The original evidence is inside a stuffed bear in Willow's bedroom at 1147 Ridgeline Road. Evelyn hid it in the seam. Mercer's eyes widened. How long have... 30 seconds. Willow just told me. We need to get to that house before Crane's people do. They may already be there. Then we get there faster. Mercer pulled her phone. I can have a team from the Ashford field office in 90 minutes. We don't have 90 minutes. The transport vans leave the Dalton site at 4 a.m., with people inside them. If Crane knows the FBI is here, he'll accelerate everything, move the victims, burn the evidence, disappear the witnesses. By the time your team arrives, there won't be anything left to find. I can't authorize a civilian operation. You're not authorizing anything. You're standing in our clubhouse at 2 a.m. because your investigation failed to protect the one person who was doing your job for you. Evelyn Hart is gone because the system you represent wasn't fast enough. Willow is alive because she walked out of the woods and found us. So you can wait for your team and your warrants and your chain of command, or you can trust the people who have been standing between that child and a monster since 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Mercer looked at him. The professional mask was gone. What was underneath was harder to read. Not weakness, not uncertainty, but the face of a woman doing the same calculation Grim had done a dozen times tonight. The cost of action versus the cost of waiting. The risk of trust versus the certainty of failure. I need to make one call, she said. She stepped outside. She was on the phone for 4 minutes. When she came back, her expression had changed, harder, resolved. My SAC is scrambling a tactical team. ETA to Blackwater is 65 minutes. I've been authorized to coordinate with local assets to preserve evidence and secure witnesses until they arrive. She paused. Local assets. That's you. Grim turned to the room. Here's what we're doing. 2 teams. Team 1 goes to Willow's house, recovers the evidence. Team 2 goes to the Dalton site and positions outside the complex. Nobody goes inside until the FBI arrives. We watch, we document, and we make sure nobody leaves with those people before the cavalry gets here. What about the clubhouse? Roach asked. Mama Jean stays with Willow. Bone, Sawyer, and 2 others stay on defense. Everyone else rides. That leaves 4 people guarding the girl against military contractors. 5, Mama Jean said from the kitchen doorway. She was holding a cast iron skillet in one hand and a look in her eyes that could have melted the skillet down to slag. I've been defending things that matter my entire life. I don't need a motorcycle to do it. Nobody argued with Mama Jean. Nobody ever had. They rolled out at 2:22 a.m., 7 bikes headed for Ridgeline Road. Grim, Roach, Pepper, Tex, and 3 riders whose names would never appear in any official record of this night. Mercer followed in her federal sedan, her headlights keeping pace with the taillights of the formation like a dog chasing a pack of wolves. The remaining 8 bikes headed northeast toward the Dalton site under Dutch's command. Dutch had returned from the Ashford field office empty-handed. The envelope had been logged as evidence, but the night duty agent had been skeptical until Mercer's call changed the equation. Now Dutch was leading 8 men toward a facility he'd never seen, guided by a map on a phone and the conviction that the people in those buildings had run out of time. The ride to Ridgeline took 14 minutes. 14 minutes of dark road and cold air, and the sound of engines filling the silence that Grim's thoughts would have occupied if he'd let them. He didn't let them. He couldn't afford the distraction of grief or rage, or the spiraling what-ifs that waited at the edge of every decision he'd made tonight. Willow's house was dark. No vehicles in the driveway. The chain-link gate stood open exactly as they'd left it hours ago. The plastic tricycle was still on its side in the mud. But something was wrong. Grim felt it before he saw it. A displacement in the air. A wrongness in the silence. The house was dark, yes, but it was the wrong kind of dark. The dark of a building that had been entered and searched and left in a state that wasn't quite the same as before. He killed the engine and dismounted. Roach flanked right. Pepper flanked left. They approached the front door with the spacing and deliberation of men who had done this before in places where the wrong step meant something worse than a lawsuit. The door was closed, unlocked. Grim pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Not the peanut butter and fear from before. Gasoline. Fresh. Poured. The carpet in the hallway was dark with it, the fumes rising in the cold air like visible heat. Out! Everyone out! Now! They backed out of the house and hit the yard just as Grim's phone rang. Unknown number. "You're too late, Holloway." Crane's voice, calm, almost amused. "Whatever she hid in that house is about to become ash. My people doused the place 20 minutes ago. The igniter is on a timer. You have, I'd say about 4 minutes, maybe less." Grim looked at the house, at the dark windows, at the room where Willow's shelf held a stuffed bear with a nation's worth of evidence sewn into its belly. "Roach, Pepper, with me." "Grim, the place is soaked. 3 minutes, in and out." He went through the door. The gasoline fumes burned his eyes immediately, turning the world into a watery blur of shapes and shadows. He pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth. Inadequate, barely functional, enough to keep him moving. Willow's room was at the end of the hall. Small. Pink walls faded to gray. A bed with a quilt that had cartoon characters on it. A bookshelf with children's books lined up by height. And on the top shelf, sitting between a lamp shaped like a star and a framed photograph of a sunset, a large brown stuffed bear with a red ribbon around its neck. Grim grabbed the bear. It was heavier than expected. He could feel the bulk of paper inside it, the sharp corners of documents pressing against the worn fabric. A sound from beneath the house. A click. Mechanical. Final. "Timer!" Roach shouted from the hallway. They ran. Grim hit the front door at full stride, the bear clutched against his chest, his boots slipping on the gasoline-soaked carpet. Roach was ahead of him. Pepper was behind him. They cleared the porch and made it to the yard and kept running because 4 minutes was an estimate, and estimates in this business were optimistic by definition. The house went up at 2:39 a.m. The ignition was sudden and total. A roar that started somewhere under the floor and erupted through the windows and the roof in a column of orange and black that turned the mist to steam and the night to noon. The heat hit Grim's back like a physical push, stumbling him forward into the mud, and for one long second the world was nothing but fire and noise and the smell of everything Willow Hart had ever called home turning to smoke. He rolled onto his back. The bear was still in his arms, singed, intact. Roach was pulling him up. Pepper was shouting something. The motorcycles were 30 feet away and the fire was growing, consuming the small house with the appetite of something that had been hungry for a long time. Grim got to his feet. He looked at the fire, at the plastic tricycle melting in the yard, at the chain-link fence glowing in the heat. Then he looked at the bear. "We got it," he said. Mercer ran from her sedan. She took the bear from Grim's hands, turned it over, and found the seam on the back. Hand-stitched, careful, the work of a mother who knew that what she was hiding might be the only thing that survived her. Mercer pulled the seam open. Documents spilled out, not photocopies. Originals, signed contracts, bank transfers with routing numbers, photographs of the underground rooms, photographs of the people inside them, photographs of Victor Crane standing in a doorway, his face clearly visible, his hand on the shoulder of a man in military fatigues who was holding a clipboard. "This is it," Mercer whispered. Her voice had the quality of someone witnessing something impossible. "This is everything. Names, dates, financial records, photographic evidence placing Crane at the site. This is enough. This is more than enough." Grim's phone buzzed. Dutch. "We're at the Dalton site. 2 vans are already loading. They're moving people out now. Grim, they're not waiting for 4 a.m. They're going now." "How many?" "I count 6 operators and at least 2 drivers. We're watching from the tree line. There are people. I can see them through the loading dock. They're being walked out in groups. Women. Some of them can barely stand." Grim closed his eyes. The fire behind him roared. The heat pressed against his back like a hand pushing him forward. "Don't let those vans leave." "How? We're 8 guys on motorcycles against armed operators. Block the road. Every bike across the access road. They can't move the vans if they can't get past you. Buy time. Mercer's team is 40 minutes out." 40 minutes is a long time to sit in front of men with long cases. "I know, I'm coming. Everybody rides to Dalton, right now." He turned to Mercer. Give me the location, exact coordinates. Grim, you can't. I can. I am. Those people don't have 40 minutes. They have right now, this second. Every second we stand here talking is a second someone is being loaded into a van and driven to a place where they disappear. You have your evidence. Your team is coming. But the people in that building need bodies between them and those vans, and the only bodies available are ours. Mercer looked at the evidence in her hands, at the burning house, at the biker with blood on his forehead and gasoline on his clothes, and the look in his eyes that she'd seen before, in soldiers, in agents, in mothers and fathers and strangers who reach the point where calculation ends and something older, something pre-verbal, takes over and says, move. 12 miles northeast, old Route 9 to the Mineral Road. You'll see the complex on the right, 3 buildings. The loading dock faces south. 40 minutes. Your team. 40 minutes. Grim mounted his bike. 7 engines fired. The convoy pulled away from the burning house and turned northeast, the flames shrinking in their mirrors, the road ahead dark and unknown and leading toward a place where the final act of this night would play out in blood and diesel and the sound of engines that wouldn't stop. The ride to Dalton took 9 minutes. They heard it before they saw it. The rumble of Dutch's bikes idling across the access road, a barrier of chrome and leather blocking the only vehicle exit from the complex. Grim's 7 bikes joined the line, 15 motorcycles across the road, 15 men standing behind them. Against the loading dock, 2 white cargo vans sat with their engines running and their rear doors open, and between the vans and the building, a line of women were being walked across the concrete by men who had stopped moving when the first motorcycle appeared at the tree line. The standoff crystallized. 15 bikers on one side, 6 operators on the other. Between them, a loading dock, 2 vans, and human beings whose survival depended on which side blinked first. One of the operators stepped forward. He was shorter than the others, but moved with the compressed efficiency of someone who had spent decades in places where height didn't matter and speed was everything. He looked at the line of motorcycles, at the men behind them, and at the road that was no longer open. "Move your bikes," he said. His voice carried across the lot with the flat authority of a command, not a request. Grim stepped forward. His boots hit the concrete. His shadow stretched across the loading dock in the floodlight. "No." "You don't know what you're interfering with." "I know exactly what I'm interfering with. 37 names on a list, 6 of them with marks next to them. Women who can't stand up. A mining shaft scheduled for demolition on Friday. I know what the marks mean. I know what the shaft is for." The operator's expression didn't change, but his hand moved. A slight adjustment, a rebalancing of weight, the preparation for something that hadn't happened yet but was being calculated with the precision of a man who calculated these things for a living. "You have no authority here. I have 15 men who aren't moving. 15 men who aren't armed. 15 men who don't need to be." From somewhere inside the building, a sound, thin, high, a voice, a woman's voice, calling out in a language Grim didn't recognize, the words unintelligible but the meaning universal. "Help, help, someone help us." The sound went through the line of bikers like an electrical current. Shoulders squared, jaws set, hands tightened into fists at sides. 15 men who had been told their entire lives that they were the dangerous ones, the outcasts, the ones mothers warned their children about, and who were now standing between actual danger and the people it wanted to consume. And every single one of them understood with absolute bone-deep clarity that this was the moment. This was the reason. This was why they'd ridden through the rain and the dark and the mist and the fear. Not for glory, not for redemption, not for the story someone would tell later, for the voice calling from the dark, for the woman who couldn't stand, for the child sleeping in a clubhouse 30 miles away who had walked out of the woods and trusted the most dangerous men she could find because the safe ones had already failed her. Grim looked at the operator. "You've got 2 choices. You walk away from those vans and you disappear into the dark. Or you don't. And I promise you on everything I've got left, that if you choose the second option, you will never forget this night. Because we will not move, we will not flinch, and we will hold this line until the ground gives out beneath us." The operator stared at him. 30 seconds of silence that stretched like a wire between 2 points of no return. Then a phone rang. The operator answered it, listened. His face changed. A subtle shift, a recalculation, the expression of someone receiving information that altered every variable. He lowered the phone. Crane's gone. What? Crane. He's in the wind, left 20 minutes ago, private airstrip north of town. The operator looked at his men, then at the vans, then at the women standing on the loading dock in the cold. Our contract was with Crane. Crane is gone. We're done. He turned. His men turned. They walked to the black SUV parked behind the building, got in, and drove into the dark without headlights, without a word, without looking back. The loading dock was silent. 15 bikers stared at 2 vans and a line of women who stared back at them with expressions that ranged from terror to disbelief to the first fragile, trembling edge of something that might, in time, become relief. Grim walked toward them, his boots on the concrete, his shadow stretching, his hands open at his sides, empty, visible, shaking. A woman at the front of the line, thin, mid-20s, bruises on her wrists, eyes that had seen the inside of a cage, looked at him and said one word in accented English. Safe? Grim's voice broke. For the first time all night, it broke. Yeah, you're safe. And then the sirens came. Not Eccles's sirens, not Blackwater County. Federal sirens, the heavy, full-throated wail of SUVs and tactical vehicles pouring down Old Route 9 in a column of white headlights that lit up the mineral road like daylight. Mercer's team. 37 minutes. 3 minutes early, but behind the relief, behind the sirens, behind the women stepping off the loading dock into blankets and arms, and the first safe hands they'd felt in months, something crawled through Grim's chest. A cold, sharp thing that wouldn't let go. Crane was gone. In the wind. Private airstrip. 20 minutes ago. Which meant Crane had known. Before the house burned. Before the Dalton standoff. Before any of it. He had known the endgame was coming, and he had prepared an exit, and he had walked through it while his empire burned around him. And the contractors were gone. And the deputies were compromised. And there was nobody between Crane and wherever he was going. Nobody except the road. Grim's phone rang. Mama Jean. Baby, there's a car coming up the drive. Not a truck. Not police. A town car. Black. Moving slow. Crane wasn't running. Crane had never been running. The private airstrip was the misdirection. The contractors walking away was the signal. The whole night. The Ridgeline building, the deputies, the standoff at Dalton, all of it had been a stage. A theater of escalation designed to pull every rider, every agent, every pair of eyes 30 miles from the only target that mattered. Willow. The girl who knew where the evidence was. The girl who could testify. The girl whose mother had died to protect her. The only loose end that couldn't be buried in a mine shaft or burned in a house fire or driven across a state line in a cargo van. Crane wasn't running from the bikers. He was going around them, straight to the clubhouse, straight to the child. Grim was on his bike before the thought finished forming. The engine screamed. Gravel sprayed. He hit the access road at 60 and climbed to 80 on the mineral road, and by the time he reached Old Route 9, the speedometer had stopped being a number and become a prayer. A wordless, formless, desperate plea thrown into the dark by a man who had nothing left to offer except velocity and the refusal to let the last promise he'd made become another lie. 30 miles. At this speed, 20 minutes, maybe less, maybe not enough. Behind him, the sound of engines. Roach, Pepper, Tex, Dutch. All of them. Every rider who could mount a bike and twist a throttle, following the man they'd argued with and doubted and challenged and trusted, following him through the dark toward a clubhouse where a little girl was watching a black car pull into the yard. And the only thing between her and the man who had destroyed her world was a woman with a cast-iron skillet, 4 exhausted riders, and a locked gate that wouldn't hold for more than 60 seconds against someone who had nothing left to lose. The engine screamed through Blackwater County like a chorus of something ancient and furious and unbreakable. 30 miles. The longest 30 miles of Grim's life. And at the end of them, either a rescue or a reckoning, and the terrible, crushing possibility that he might arrive to find out which one it was too late to change. The Blacktown car was already inside the gate when Grimm's headlight crested the last hill. He saw it from a quarter-mile out, a dark shape parked at an angle across the gravel lot, its driver's door open, the interior light casting a pale yellow rectangle on the ground. The clubhouse security lights were on. The front door was closed. And between the town car and the building, two shapes moved in the dark. One tall, one shorter, both heading toward the entrance with the deliberate pace of men who had already decided what they were going to do and had stopped caring about what it would cost. Grimm didn't slow down. He came through the gate at 60 miles an hour and laid the bike down. The Harley hit the gravel on its side and slid in a shower of sparks and screaming metal, the frame carving a trench through the lot as Grimm rolled free and came up on his feet with the momentum still carrying him forward. His right knee exploded with pain, the shrapnel shifting, grinding against bone, and he stumbled but didn't fall. He couldn't fall. Falling was a luxury that belonged to people who had something softer waiting at the bottom. The taller man turned. He was big, 6'4", broad, the body of someone who had spent decades building himself into a weapon and maintaining the weapon with professional discipline. He moved toward Grimm with speed that didn't match his size. Grimm met him in the middle of the lot. The first punch caught Grimm in the jaw and spun his vision sideways. The second one found his ribs, and he felt something shift in his chest. Not a break, not yet, but the warning that comes before a break. The structural complaint of a body that has been running on nothing for 12 hours. He went down on one knee. The gravel bit through his jeans. The big man reached for him. Grimm drove upward with everything he had, knee, hip, shoulder, and buried his forehead into the man's chin. The impact traveled through both of them like a current. The big man staggered. Grimm grabbed the front of his jacket and pulled him down, and they hit the gravel together in a tangle of limbs and leather and the grunting, wordless violence of two men fighting in the dark for reasons that transcended anything personal. The big man got a hand around Grimm's throat, squeezed. The world narrowed to a tunnel, dark edges closing in, the center getting brighter, the sound of his own pulse filling his ears like a drum being beaten underwater. Then Bone was there. Bone, who had been guarding the gate and had seen the town car breach and had done the only thing Bone knew how to do, which was move toward the danger instead of away from it. The tire iron came down on the big man's forearm with a sound that was part crack and part wet pop, and the hand around Grimm's throat released. Grimm rolled away, sucked air. The world expanded again, flooding back in with color and sound and the taste of blood in his mouth. The shorter man had reached the clubhouse door. Sawyer hit him from the side. They crashed through the door together and into the bar, scattering chairs, knocking the pool cue rack off the wall, sliding across the wooden floor in a mess of broken glass and spilled coffee. Sawyer was younger, faster, but the shorter man fought with the economy of someone trained in close quarters, elbows, knees, the heel of the palm. And he put Sawyer down with a strike to the temple that made a sound like a bat hitting a watermelon. Mama Jean stepped out of the kitchen. She didn't hesitate. She didn't announce herself. She swung the cast-iron skillet in a flat arc that connected with the back of the shorter man's head with a clang that resonated through the bar like a bell in a cathedral. He went to his knees, then to his face. He didn't get up. Mama Jean looked at the skillet, then at the man on the floor, then at Grimm, who was coming through the shattered doorway with blood running from a cut above his eye and his right arm hanging at an angle that suggested the shoulder had come loose from its socket. "Upstairs," she said. "He's upstairs." Grimm's blood went cold. He took the stairs 3 at a time. The pain was everywhere now. Knee, shoulder, ribs, the cut above his eye that was flooding his vision with red. But pain was just information, and information could be ignored, and right now the only information that mattered was the sound coming from the end of the hallway. Willow's voice, small, steady, terrified. "You can't have them." Grimm rounded the corner. Victor Crane stood in the doorway of Willow's room. He was smaller than Grimm expected. 5'10", maybe. Slim. The silver hair from the website photograph was disheveled, the golf tan replaced by a grayness that came from the inside out. The look of a man whose carefully constructed exterior was cracking under the pressure of a single night that had dismantled everything he'd built. He wore a dark overcoat. No tie. His hands were empty, but the right one was in his coat pocket, and the shape of the pocket suggested that empty was a relative term. Willow stood on the far side of the bed. Between her and Crane, the bed served as a barrier. Inadequate, symbolic, the kind of wall a child builds because it's all she has. "Mr. Crane," Grimm said. Crane didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on Willow. "You know, your mother was a remarkable woman," Crane said to the girl. His voice was conversational, controlled. The voice of a man who had conducted business meetings while people suffered in basements below his feet. She could have taken the money. She could have looked the other way. Everyone else did, but she had this compulsion, this need to be right, to do the right thing. He said right thing the way someone else might say terminal illness. It's a deficiency, a flaw in the design, the inability to accept that the world runs on compromise. "Step away from the door," Grimm said. "She's dead because she couldn't compromise. Do you understand that, Willow? Not because I'm evil, not because the world is unfair, because she chose principle over survival. And principle, I said step away." Crane finally turned. He looked at Grimm. The blood, the dislocated shoulder, the knee that was barely holding weight, the eyes that had gone from creek water to something that didn't have a color, something that existed beyond the spectrum of what eyes are supposed to express. "You're in no condition to make demands. And you're in a building full of men who spent the last 12 hours learning exactly what you are. Every single one of them is on their way up those stairs right now. You've got about 30 seconds before this hallway fills up with people who have very specific feelings about men who hurt children and traffic women. So you can step away from that door and walk out of this building while you still can, or you can wait and find out what happens when 30 seconds runs out." Crane's hand moved in his pocket. Grimm didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to flinch. Flinching was a signal, and the only signal he could send right now was the one that said, "I am not bluffing. I am not negotiating. I am telling you what is going to happen, and the only choice you have is whether it happens easy or hard." Behind Grimm, boots on the stairs. Heavy. Multiple. The sound of men climbing toward a fight they were ready to finish. Crane looked past Grimm at the stairway. At the sound. At the math. He took his hand out of his pocket. Empty. He'd been bluffing too. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is." Roach appeared at the top of the stairs. Then Tex. Then Pepper. Then riders whose faces filled the hallway like a wall closing in. And Crane looked at them and saw what Grimm had seen in their eyes all night. Not rage, not vengeance, but something colder and more permanent. The absolute, unshakable certainty of men who had found their line and would not be moved from it. Crane walked. Down the hallway. Down the stairs. Through the bar where his associate lay unconscious next to an overturned table with a skillet-shaped dent in the back of his skull. Through the front door where the gravel lot was now filling with motorcycles and headlights, and the sound of engines dying one by one as every rider who had scattered across Blackwater County returned to the only place that mattered. He walked to his town car. He got in. And before he could start the engine, the blue and white lights appeared at the gate. Not Eccles. Not County. Federal vehicles. 3 SUVs and a tactical van. Their sirens off. Their lights revolving in slow, deliberate circles that painted the lot in blue and white, and the color of authority that Crane had spent years buying and had just run out of credit to purchase. Agent Mercer stepped out of the lead vehicle. "Victor Crane, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and the murder of Evelyn Hart. Additional charges pending." Crane sat in his town car with his hands on the steering wheel and watched through the windshield as agents approached from both sides. His expression didn't change. The mask held. Even now, even at the end, the mask held. The public face, the donor's smile, the civic leader veneer that had allowed him to walk among decent people for years while operating a machine that consumed the vulnerable and disposed of the inconvenient. The agents opened his door. They pulled him out. They put him on the ground and cuffed him, and the gravel pressed into the cheek that had smiled for cameras and shaken hands with politicians and kissed grandchildren at holiday parties, and the silver hair that had been combed with precision every morning for 30 years ground into the dirt of a parking lot outside a motorcycle clubhouse where a little girl had found safety among the last people anyone would have expected to provide it. Grim watched from the doorway. Roach stood beside him. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say. Not yet. The words would come later, in the quiet hours, in the aftermath, in the days and weeks and months of processing that would follow this night. But right now, in this moment, language was insufficient. The only thing that existed was the sight of a man being put into the back of a federal vehicle and driven away from the people he had hurt, and the sound of the engine fading, and the silence that followed, and the first pale suggestion of dawn appearing at the eastern edge of the sky like a wound starting to heal. Grim turned and went back inside. He climbed the stairs one more time. His knee had stopped sending pain signals, not because it had healed, but because the nervous system had reached its limit and shut down the complaint department. His shoulder hung at his side, useless. The cut above his eye had stopped bleeding and crusted into a dark line that pulled at the skin when he blinked. Willow was still standing behind the bed. She hadn't moved since Crane left the doorway. She was looking at the space where he'd been, the air he'd occupied, as if his shadow had left a stain on the light that she could still see. Grim lowered himself to the floor. He couldn't sit in a chair. His body had given up on chairs. The floor was solid and cold and honest, and right now he needed all three of those things. "He's gone," Grim said. Willow looked at him. "Mama's gone too." Grim's throat closed. He let it. He sat on the floor of a room that wasn't his, in a building he'd helped build with his own hands, across from a child whose world had been destroyed so completely that the only structure left standing was the trust she'd placed in a stranger on a rain-soaked road 8 hours ago. "Yeah," he said. "She is." Willow came around the bed. She sat on the floor next to him, close but not touching, shoulder to shoulder with 6 inches of air between them that felt like the most important distance in the world. "She was brave," Willow said. "She was the bravest. She saved people. The people in those buildings. She saved them." "She did." "And you saved me." Grim's eyes burned. He blinked. The crusted cut pulled. He didn't care. "You saved yourself, Willow. You walked out of those woods. You stood in the middle of that road. You chose to trust someone. That was all you. That was the bravest thing that happened tonight." She was quiet for a long time. The dawn light was reaching through the window now, turning the room from black to gray to the soft, uncertain blue that exists only in the first minutes of morning when the world hasn't decided yet what kind of day it's going to be. "What happens to me now?" The question landed on Grim's chest like a stone. He felt the weight of it settle into the space where all the other weights lived. The shrapnel, the memories, the names of people he'd lost, the promises he'd broken, the long catalog of failures that he carried the way other men carry wallets or keys, always present, always heavy, always reminding him of what they represented. "We figure that out together. I don't have anywhere to go." "You've got here." She looked at him. "Here? This building, these people. It's not a house, it's not a home the way you had before, but it's a place where people look out for each other, and right now, that's what you've got. And it's not nothing." Mama Jean appeared in the doorway. She had a blanket over one arm and a mug of something hot in her hand. She looked at Grim on the floor and Willow beside him, and she didn't say a word. She draped the blanket over both of them, one blanket, 2 people, and set the mug on the nightstand and left. The blanket smelled like the clubhouse, cigarette smoke and coffee and leather, and the indefinable scent of a place where imperfect people had built something together out of the ruins of their individual failures. Willow pulled the blanket tighter and leaned her head against Grim's arm. He felt her weight. She weighed nothing. She weighed everything. The sun came up at 6:17 a.m. It came up over the ridge east of Blackwater County and poured through the windows of the clubhouse like something being returned. Light, warmth, visibility, the basic conditions of a world that functions the way it's supposed to. The mist burned off the parking lot. The chrome on the motorcycles caught the light and threw it back in fragments. The gravel, still torn up from the night's violence, sparkled with frost that was already melting. Grim was in the bar. His shoulder had been reset by Pepper, a procedure that involved a towel, a doorframe, and language that would have gotten both of them banned from polite society. His knee was wrapped in an ace bandage that Mama Jean had produced from a first aid kit the size of a suitcase. The cut above his eye had been closed with butterfly strips that Pepper applied with the steady hands of a medic who had closed worse wounds in worse conditions. The club sat around the bar. Nobody had left. Nobody had slept. Coffee cups and cigarette butts and the particular silence of people who have survived something together and are just beginning to understand what that means. Mercer came in at 7. She looked like she hadn't slept either. The windbreaker was wrinkled, the professional mask replaced by something more human, exhaustion, grief, the complex expression of a woman who had won a battle and lost a person and couldn't separate the victory from the cost. Crane is in federal custody. Eccles turned himself in an hour ago and is cooperating. We've recovered 23 victims from the Dalton site, and we're searching 2 additional properties based on what the original documents revealed. 23, Grimm said. Alive. Some in bad shape. Medical teams are on site. And the ones who weren't alive? Mercer paused. We found remains in the mine shaft at the Ridgeline property. The forensic team is working. It's going to take time. Evelyn? We found her. Mercer's voice dropped. In the basement of the first building you searched tonight, the one with Eccles' car. She was in a locked room behind the main holding area. She stopped, corrected herself. She was alive. The room went still. Grimm set down his coffee. What did you say? Evelyn Hart is alive, barely. She's been transported to Ashford General. She's in critical condition, dehydrated, multiple injuries, signs of prolonged restraint. But she's alive. Grimm's hand found the edge of the bar. He held on to it because the floor had just shifted beneath him, and the walls had moved, and the ceiling had lowered, and the room was doing things that rooms don't normally do. And he needed something solid to anchor himself to while the information rewired everything he'd believed for the last 4 hours. Crane said she was gone. He said she was no longer a factor. Crane lied. He lied about everything. He lied about her being dead to make you panic. He lied about the airstrip to pull you away from the clubhouse. He's been lying for so long that I don't think he knows the difference anymore. Grimm looked at the ceiling, at the stairs, at the room above the bar where a little girl was sleeping under a blanket that smelled like cigarettes and coffee. I have to tell her. I know. He climbed the stairs one more time, the last time tonight. His body had nothing left, no adrenaline, no anger, no desperate energy to draw from. He moved on something else now, something quieter, something that lived in the part of him that had sat on the floor next to a child and told her the truth even when the truth was a weapon, and was now going to tell her a different truth, one that might, impossibly, be a kind of medicine. Willow was asleep, the blanket pulled up to her chin, the photograph from the county fair on the nightstand beside the empty mug, the morning light falling across her face, softening the sharpness that exhaustion and fear had carved into features that were supposed to be soft anyway. He sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped. She opened her eyes. Willow. She looked at him. Those eyes. Ancient and young, broken and unbreakable. Your mama is alive. She didn't react the way he expected. No scream, no tears, no explosive release of the pressure that had been building in her small body since the night the truck came and the door slammed and the screaming stopped. She reached out and took his hand. She held it. And then, slowly, carefully, like a structure that has been holding itself rigid for so long that the act of releasing is more terrifying than the act of holding, she began to cry. Quiet. Deep. The crying of a child who had decided not to cry because crying was a luxury she couldn't afford, and who was now being told that the emergency was over and the luxury was hers again. Grimm held her hand and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The hand was enough. The presence was enough. The fact that he was there, damaged, exhausted, bleeding through butterfly strips, smelling like gasoline and gravel, and the wrong end of a night that should have killed him, was the only message she needed. He was there. He hadn't left. He hadn't lied. He'd promised to find her mother, and her mother was alive. The world had broken its pattern, just this once, just enough. 3 weeks later, the Iron Reapers hosted a gathering at the clubhouse. Not a party. The word didn't fit. It was something without a name. A convergence, a settling, the moment after the storm when people come outside and stand in the wet grass and look at each other and confirm that they're still there. The parking lot was full of bikes. The bar was full of people. Mama Jean had been cooking since dawn. Chili, cornbread, coffee by the gallon. And the building smelled like food and warmth and the kind of domesticity that existed in this place alongside the leather and the engine oil and the photographs with black ribbons on the wall. Evelyn Hart sat in a chair by the window. She was thin. Thinner than the photograph, thinner than the memory, thin the way people get when the body has been eating itself to survive. Her left arm was in a sling. Bruises faded to yellow marked her neck and wrists. But she was there, present, alive. Watching her daughter with eyes that had come back from a distance most people never travel and had found, at the end of the return journey, the one thing worth coming back for. Willow sat on the floor at her mother's feet, drawing. She'd been drawing for days. Mama Jean had given her a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils, and Willow had filled page after page with images that told the story she couldn't tell in words. Dark roads, bright headlights, a building with smoke coming from the windows, a line of motorcycles stretching across a road like a wall. Today she was working on something different. Grim stood at the bar, his knee wrapped, his shoulders stiff, a cup of coffee in his hand that he'd been holding for 20 minutes without drinking. He was watching the room, the riders, the women from the Dalton site who had been invited and who sat in clusters, some talking, some silent, all of them occupying space in a building that had been built by outcasts and was now, temporarily, the safest place in Blackwater County. Tex sat beside him. County's talking about commendations, some kind of civilian recognition ceremony. No. That's what I told them. We didn't do this for a plaque. I know why we did it. Tex looked at the room, at Willow, at Evelyn, at the writers who were laughing at something Bone had said. Probably inappropriate, definitely profane. Exactly the kind of humor that men use to cover the fact that they're feeling something they don't have permission to express. We did it because a little girl walked out of the woods and asked for help, and we were the ones standing there. That's it? That's everything. Roach came over. He set a shot glass on the bar, poured whiskey into it, and pushed it toward Grim. Mercer called. Final count from the Dalton site and the Ridgeline properties. 29 survivors. 3 additional remains recovered from the mine shaft. Crane's being charged federally. Eccles is in witness protection. The county sheriff resigned this morning. Grim looked at the shot glass but didn't pick it up. And the rest of Crane's network? Mercer says it extends into 3 other states. The documents Evelyn hid, the originals from the Bear, connected to bank accounts, transport routes, and contact networks that go way beyond Blackwater. FBI's opened a multi-jurisdictional task force. Roach paused. She asked if you'd be willing to testify. About what? About finding the victims. About what you heard in that building. About the phone calls from Crane. Grim picked up the shot glass, turned it in his hand. The whiskey caught the light from the window and turned it amber, and for a second the glass looked like a small lamp, something that held light instead of liquor. Yeah, I'll testify. You sure? Court means records. Records mean names. Names mean attention. I'm sure. He set the glass down without drinking. Some rituals don't require completion to serve their purpose. Willow appeared at his side. She had the sketchbook pressed against her chest, the way she'd pressed herself against his vest on the road in the rain, holding something valuable against the part of her that felt safest. I made you something. She set the sketchbook on the bar and opened it to the last page. The drawing was simple, the way children's art is simple. Not because the artist lacks complexity, but because they haven't learned yet to obscure what they mean. A motorcycle, drawn in careful black pencil, parked beneath a sky that transitioned from dark blue at the top to bright yellow at the bottom. A sunrise. The motorcycle wasn't alone. Behind it, stretching to the edges of the page, a line of other motorcycles extended into the distance, each one slightly different, each one part of the same formation. And at the bottom of the page, in handwriting that was still learning how to be steady, she had written, "He came back tonight, but so did the good guys." Grim looked at the drawing for a long time. The bar noise faded. The voices faded. The smell of chili and coffee and leather faded until there was nothing left but the page and the pencil lines and the words written by a child who had walked through the darkest night of her life and come out the other side with something intact. Not innocence, that was gone, but something harder and more valuable. The knowledge that darkness is real, and the people who fight it are real, and sometimes, not always, not reliably, but sometimes, the ones who show up are the ones nobody expected. He tore the page carefully from the sketchbook. He walked to the wall where the photographs hung, the brothers past and present, the black ribbons, the history of a club that had been called every bad name in the book and had earned some of them and survived all of them. He pinned the drawing in the center of the wall. It hung there among the photographs like a window, a small rectangle of color in a field of black and white, a sunrise surrounded by faces that had seen too much darkness, a child's answer to a question that none of them had known how to ask. Evelyn watched from her chair by the window. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The tears on her face said it. The hand on Willow's shoulder when the girl returned to her side said it. The way she looked at Grim across the room, not with gratitude, which would have been too simple, but with recognition, the acknowledgement of one damaged person seeing another and understanding that the damage was the point, that the cracks were where the light got in, that the men who had saved her daughter and found her in the dark and brought her back from a place she'd never expected to leave were not heroes in any traditional sense, but something more useful and more real. People who had been broken by the same world that broke her and had chosen, despite every reason not to hold the pieces together long enough to shelter someone else. The gathering lasted until late afternoon. People came and went. Writers from other chapters arrived, heard the story, shook hands, left. The women from the Dalton site were connected with federal victim services and driven to a facility in Ashford, where they would begin the long, non-linear, uncertain process of rebuilding lives that had been demolished by men who saw them as inventory. By evening, the clubhouse was quiet again. Mama Jean cleaned the kitchen. Bone fell asleep on the couch. Pepper sat outside on an overturned crate, smoking, watching the sunset paint the ridge in colors that didn't have names. Grim stood in the parking lot. His bike was still on its side where he'd laid it down 12 hours ago. The chrome was scratched. The left mirror was gone. The tank had a dent the size of a fist. He righted it, checked the engine, and sat on the seat without starting it. Just sat there, feeling the shape of the thing beneath him, the weight, the familiarity. Roach came out and stood beside him. "You okay?" "No." "You going to be?" Grim looked at the clubhouse. At the light in the upstairs window where Willow and Evelyn were sitting together for the first time in weeks, in a room that smelled like coffee and leather and the unlikely safety of a place the world had written off. He looked at the wall inside, where a child's drawing of a motorcycle under a sunrise hung among the photographs of men who had lived hard and lost much and kept riding anyway. He looked at the road, the long, dark, familiar road that led away from here and toward everywhere else, the road that had brought a bleeding child out of the woods and into the path of men who didn't know they were waiting for her. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." He didn't start the engine. He didn't ride. He sat there in the settling dark, in the quiet, in the space between what had happened and what would happen next, and he let the silence fill him. Not the tense silence of men waiting for a fight, but the other kind. The kind that comes after. The kind that means it's over. The kind that sounds, if you listen carefully enough, like the distant hum of engines fading into a night that has finally, mercifully, exhausted its capacity for harm. The drawing stayed on the wall. It stayed there for years. Long after the trial ended and Crane was sentenced. Long after Eccles testified and disappeared into a new name in a new state. Long after the Ridgeline properties were demolished and the mine shafts sealed and the county built a memorial park on the site where the Dalton complex once stood. Long after Evelyn healed. Long after Willow grew taller and steadier and started smiling in a way that reached her eyes. Long after Mama Jean taught her to make hot chocolate with cayenne pepper, and Pepper taught her to change a tire, and Bone taught her card games that were definitely not appropriate for her age, and Grim taught her nothing at all except the one lesson he knew by heart, that you don't have to be whole to be strong, and you don't have to be perfect to be worth trusting. And sometimes the safest place in the world is the last place anyone would look. The drawing stayed on the wall. A motorcycle beneath a sunrise, and the words of a girl who had walked out of the darkness and into the arms of men who had been living there for years, and who had found, together, that the dark is not the end of the story. It is only the place where the story waits for someone brave enough to begin it.